Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Bristol Town Council meeting of April 13th. If you could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Once again, good evening. Mr. Clerk, if you could move us right along here.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the Town Council, the first item on this evening's agenda is the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next is a submission of minutes of previous meetings, items A1 and A2.
Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next is ordinance 2016-03. This is a proposed amendment to the town code to allow, under certain circumstances, alcohol use and sale on town property.
And this is a public hearing?
No, it's just a regular...
Look at me. I skipped right past that.
Yep.
Just a regular ordinance.
Regular ordinance reading.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Absolutely.
being a second reading, and we had discussed this and taken the time to go over this ordinance between all of us as our colleagues in administration and the police department and all the departments involved. Tonight we have with us Colleen Bazzoni and Andrew Murray from the Trust, just to give a little guidance on the liability aspects and their input on the proposed ordinance changes. We discussed to have a workshop. It is my intention, Mr. Chairman, to continue this item because of due diligence that I believe we should have the workshop to have more of a discussion and take their advice and guidance in that workshop before entertaining a motion going forward with this ordinance. So if I could just entertain the trust to, go over this ordinance and maybe give us their guidance on what they looked at when they read it.
And before we do that, actually, we have a scheduled meeting on April 27th, which is the approval, or the final approval of the budget. Typically, that is not a long meeting. If everyone can book the time out, we could actually have that workshop on that night, which is April 27th, and we can talk about that at the end of this continuance. But please, Colleen, right?
Yes.
Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. Colleen Bazzoni, Director of Operations and Member Services with the Trust. With me is Andy Murray, who's also the General Counsel at the Trust. So the reason that we came tonight is at your invitation first and foremost, but secondly, we have reviewed the ordinance that you had drafted regarding liability and liquor usage, etc. And Andy will comment a little bit on some proposed changes that we had. But I think from our perspective, I think it's important for you to understand the difference between host liquor liability and liquor liability coverage, and try to give you a little 101 lesson on the difference between the two, because it does get a little bit confusing in when you should have it and when you shouldn't. The first is host liquor liability. It's included generally in your general liability policy. It's included in the town's policy. And it basically refers to when it provides against coverage for bodily injury and property damage suits that are brought by third parties that might be injured as a result of alcohol being served at an event. The event has to be hosted by you, and there cannot be any cost associated with that. So it's basically you're serving alcohol, but there's no fee for the alcohol. There is no ticket price included. It's just basically you might just have a little social function where there might be beer and wine served. And if that's the case, then host liquor liability would apply. That's the simpler one, the more common one. When it gets to be a little bit more intense, or I guess involved, is when you either bring in a third party, a caterer, or you have a larger event. If you are actually selling alcohol, distributing alcohol, manufacturing, which is part of the definition, which there's not too many that are, unless you're making your own beer, I guess, these days, or wine. But generally what happens is that in those cases where you're selling a ticket, but, once you purchase this $25 ticket for the fundraiser, but you walk in the door and you're then allowed an open bar or cash bar, or not a cash bar, beer and wine, you want to make sure that somebody is purchasing a liquor liability policy. That could be the caterer that is putting on, the event as part of the fundraiser. It could be the town, if the town is planning to sell tickets and serve this alcohol. It could be a restaurant, et cetera. So whoever is the one that is selling the ticket for admission, that would include the alcohol, you would want to make sure you're securing a liquor liability policy. That liquor liability policy is different from the general liability policy. The general liability is going to cover all things, the slips, trips, and falls, the harassment. There's just a number of things that would generally fall under a general liability policy. The liquor liability is not included in that policy, and that's why there needs to be a separate policy purchased for these events. And as you can imagine, because it's a larger exposure, it's a bigger exposure, you want to make sure you're fully protected. One of the things that we tell people constantly is if you're putting on this type of event, you're generally raising significant funds, or if you're hosting a wedding and you're inviting all these people and you're paying out all this money, the cost to purchase a liquor liability policy is negligible compared to what you ultimately have to spend on the event or ultimately have to pay out in the event you're sued. So we would always recommend that if there is a cost associated with a ticket price, or if there's beer, wine, liquor sold at an event, that you would require liquor liability coverage in addition to the general liability coverage.
And if I may, Colleen, that's something that the trust can help
Right.
out with, either in terms of directing that third party to where to purchase, either
Right.
from the trust or somewhere else.
So what happens is that, yes, that's true if it's on a town facility. If it's on a private property, this policy would not help, but it's called TULIP, which it's an acronym that stands for Tenant User Liability Insurance Program or policy. And basically what it is, it's a special event policy, so that if somebody wanted to have something on, in the parks, in one of your parks, and they wanted to put up a tent and have an event, and they say, well, I don't have insurance, but so how do I go about doing this? You can refer them or put as part of your policy, if you have one later on, as many of our cities and towns that do have facilities that warrant venues for events, they will put in there that you can access this TULIP policy. You go onto a website. Although it's affiliated with the trust, it's not underwritten by the trust. It's just a sponsorship of the trust through our affiliation with a reinsurer that we have, that we're able to provide this. And as a member of the trust, they would have to put in the town code, and then through that, they can purchase both the general liability coverage, and then they would check off a box if they need liquor liability coverage. And in that manner, it gets added, and the town is then added as an additional insured, so that financial responsibility is then tied to the policy. So it's depending upon the event, it's based on the number of people that are involved, the type of event. Obviously, if you add in liquor liability, it does increase the cost. But again, to get $1 million worth of coverage for that type of event, I think it's the security that they would need and want.
How long does it take to issue that TULIP policy?
It's within minutes. So basically, a third party is able to go onto the website. You can put in all the information. It's basically, when is it, what is it, how many people are attending. You put in, your basic information on name, address, information, and then you press request a quote. It gives you the price, and then if you choose to move forward with the policy, you then have to insert a credit card, and then a copy of that certificate gets emailed to the town, and a copy gets mailed to the trust. So it's instantaneous.
Can you tell me how you would define the two different categories? For example, I think it's pretty clear that if, a town organization was having something, we may want to get one of the TULIP. I don't know if we would have to get a TULIP policy or not. But what about what we would view as, I'll use the word, and this may not be an actual definition, but I'll use the word as sort of quasi-public. organization. Not quite a 501c3, the town funds them. I'm thinking they'd all fall under the second.
No,
you
it's
described.
not necessarily what type of organization, it's what type of event. So it could be Colleen Bazzioni that needs a tulip policy, it could be the town of Bristol
Oh,
that
so
needs
no
a
cost
town
involved,
of... So
that's- okay.
it's not necessarily what type of organization,
Okay.
it's the type of event that you're
Okay.
having and whether alcohol is sold or not. So even if the town decided, for a fundraiser for, the 4th of July parade, and they decided that they're going to throw, this big fundraiser that you buy a ticket for $50 and in it you get alcohol included, then my recommendation is either make sure the caterer has a liquor liability policy that's going to name the town as an additional insured, or the town, if you're going to have, yourself do it, make sure you purchase a liquor liability policy, because at that point, you're not covered under your traditional general liability policy.
So everybody needs one, is another way
Yes.
to say that. Okay.
And not only, we have a director of Parks and Recreation, but whether it be a park, but any public building, that there's a cost attached with the ticket, you recommend, because of liability purposes as a whole, going forward with this ordinance. Is that correct?
Well, our recommendation is any time that there is liquor served, that there's a cost included in the price of the ticket or cash bar, et cetera, that you would require liquor liability policy. That's our recommendation. It's your administration that needs to decide whether that's what you choose to go forward. But our recommendation is always to require a liquor liability policy naming the town as an additional insured. And that's also in addition to the general liability policy that you would want for them utilizing your facilities.
How many communities have such an ordinance as this? Are you familiar?
I don't know specifically how many communities actually have an ordinance, but I do know, and actually I was with another community on Monday night talking about the similar thing, and they have a policy in place. They have quite a few venues that are utilized for weddings, retirement parties, et cetera, and they have in their policy that you're required to provide liquor liability.
Colleen, we've entertained within the Parks and Recreation Community Center that we wanted to do like an art
paint?
class, an
Okay.
art class, and typically what the tradition is people sign up for the art class. The artist comes, and as part of the class, they typically they're pretty much all women, and they have a glass of wine. There's a fee, a very, very minimal fee for the class, and the wine is part of the class.
So are you supplying the wine?
Pardon?
Are you supplying the town
we've
supplying the
never
wine?
done it. We've actually
So if the
just
people
thought
bring
about it.
in their own wine, I don't know that would be an issue, but if the town is supplying it as part of the cost, then I would say there needs to be a liquor liability policy.
Right, but the person teaching the class would have the wine.
Then you would make sure
That she had
Yeah, because
liquor
if that person is receiving a benefit from the ticket price,
Okay. Okay.
so I would say yes, but if the people in the class bring in their own beer or wine, then I would say no. But if the teacher is supplying it, then I would think you have an issue.
Yeah, I think the key is that if the alcohol is part of the fee,
The cost.
the cost of the class, then that's when you need the policy. On the other hand, if you're charging $15 for the class, and at the end of the 5 weeks or whatever, everyone brings their own food and their own wine, then it's not necessary.
Exactly.
It's a very good question, and I'm sure now that we're going through this, and there's going to be more dialogue during the workshop, Colleen and Walter, is the scale of, from something small of that magnitude to a park venue, but in its own right, while the town is being liable for any such event and how it's deciphered, whether it's small or large, you might have the large venue people saying, well, why aren't they doing it? It's because it's so minute, it's not right. Once we craft something, I think it should be across the board.
That would be our recommendation as well. There needs to be consistency throughout the town with all of your venues, and that's one of the things that another community is wrestling with, essentially, is because they want to be able to provide, a community center for birthday parties, but do they need to purchase a big liability policy? So, those are things you have to look at the type of exposure. But my suggestion is you can't say that the town doesn't need a liquor liability policy, but, the Sammy Jones or Colleen Bazzioni needs to have one if she's going to use town facilities. I think you need to make it uniform across the board.
Are you at liberty to tell me the cost of what that
Yep.
policy?
Sure.
Is it pretty much a set rate?
Yeah, so it's based on the event. So I would tell you that for probably under 500 for just a traditional event, not high exposure, you're looking at, for general liability, about $100 to $125. Once you add liquor liability in there, you're probably in the 300 ranges.
So under 500 people, it's about $300.
Yes. I
And
haven't looked lately, but my understanding is it's about
That's an
anywhere in the
estimate.
300s for
Okay.
when liquor is added in. But it's a one-day event, 24 hours, $1 million worth of coverage.
Okay.
And that's a traditional, like a wedding. It's not, something that would have a higher exposure. And off the top of my head, I can't think of what.
Well, some type
A carnival or something,
yeah.
or a beer tent or something like that would have a larger fee associated with it.
And I think it's important to point out to everyone here and at home that this is not a solicitation for more alcohol used on town property. It's to make sure that we have a clear policy on how we want to move forward, and also have a consistent policy, as has been mentioned already, that everybody gets the same treatment, that everybody needs to do the same thing, because we obviously want to keep everyone at the event safe, and we also want to keep the town out of harm's way.
Right, which is a good point, because one of the things that the town carries its own insurance, so the town is responsible for its own liability. The difference being is that once you allow the public to utilize your buildings for their events, it's no longer a town liability. The town is always required to maintain its buildings and keep its buildings safe for the general public. So if it's something associated with the building itself, the town's going to be liable for it. So we're not trying to shirk the town's liabilities. We're just trying to make sure that, the town is protected for allowing the use of the facilities for other than town business.
Any other questions for Colleen? I know Andy wanted to
Andy's
share a
gonna
few.
just have a couple of points for you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Colleen.
Good evening.
evening.
Andrew
Good
Murray,
evening.
General Counsel for the Trust. We did have a chance to look at the ordinance at the Trust, and we had two slight revisions that we recommend. The first is on Section 18-81, paragraph 5. It reads that the applicant must retain a police detail. We think it should read, an applicant must retain and be responsible for the cost of a police detail. The rest of the sentence could be the same.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. What section? What section are you on? Sorry.
18-81,
81,
paragraph 5.
Right. That's a good point.
Number 5. Oh, okay.
So we think it should read, applicant must retain and be responsible for the cost of a police detail with number of police officers as specified by the police department.
Seems to make sense.
That's a good one.
The
Okay.
second revision we propose is under 18-83, paragraph 2. It calls for the third-party caterer to provide a certificate of insurance. We think the sentence should read that the certificate of insurance should expressly provide for general liability and workers' compensation coverage.
What is that distinction? Help us understand that
It
distinction.
just specifies that they're covered for GL and workers' comp, whereas as it reads now, it's open-ended.
So would you keep what's here and then add the workers' comp piece, or would you change the whole sentence?
No, I would simply change it to read, third-party caterer must provide a certificate of insurance showing general liability and workers' comp coverage for a minimum of $1 million, and everything else could be the same.
I have it.
Yeah, I'm sure we can have it drafted for our workshop so we
Yes.
have the exact verbiage.
Good.
Well, we're happy with our solicitor because you've only found two. That's
Do you I mean, can I just ask you a question? You know, we really haven't discussed this yet. It's been put off a few times.
Yes.
And, you know, when I go through it, I'm not sure how if I support this or not, because I do feel that, you know, I understand what the chairman's point is, that this isn't it is not an invitation to have everybody coming in and wanting to have parties and so forth on town property, which in our case is primarily parks. We don't have a lot of town buildings for this. But I actually do feel that is what this does. And I think there's only two instances that I can think of where alcohol, one is a church organization, and there's another that is a town event. And I think it's perfectly fine to keep it somehow at that. But I also read through this, and it gets a little, to me, I don't know does it cover everything it's supposed to cover? To me, it feels a little, I don't know if it's overly complicating the situation, or if it's covering all these things. I mean, it gets a little confusing to me. I just would, since we haven't discussed it and you're here tonight, I'd just like your view on that.
From the coverage standpoint, the ordinance meets the coverage that we provide. Colleen addressed the tulip issue.
Right.
But
I mean, I guess my question is more like the resident entities, the town committees, the various groups. I mean, I understand it. To me, it just feels like it's less than simple, maybe. I don't know.
If I may,
Insurance is never.
No, look, let me just preface my comments to say I'm not the biggest fan of alcohol to begin with, and I'm not a big fan of, because I think exactly what we're doing here is saying, wow, now we can get a petition to go before the council, and we could at some point, there's nothing in here that limits this, that we could have 5 different parties going on at one park, and what happens to the park for the use of the public, you know, so, I mean, that's just a potential issue. So I'm just not a fan of it, but I just felt that it was kind of a...
I feel, Councilwoman, that obviously we'll have more dialogue in the workshop, and your points are well taken. But like you said, every applicant or petition will be before this council, so I think it's up to this council of maybe your reservations of how many events are going on at the same time or how much is utilized. I think the coverage aspect, and again, I thank you for coming down to be in front of the public to explain how we're taking the time with this liability topic to incorporate it going forward, to revise the ordinance. And I think the efforts of the police department in comparison to what other communities have on the books with the application process and the differential of the resident aspect and non-profit organizations, I think we can have a discussion in the workshop on how we feel it fits our town and addresses our needs of any reservations that I feel our colleagues have. So,
Chief, did you want to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to address the trust real quick. So we're a volunteer fire department, a municipal fire department, town-owned buildings, they have a clam boil, they serve beer, they'd be required to get the tulip insurance. Is that correct?
Are they selling it?
I was just
Well, they're selling tickets to the event.
Yes.
providing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's true, I hadn't thought about that.
Again, it's that uniform, if you're going to make it for one, you should probably make it for everybody.
or just not do anything and then roll the dice of if something should happen, then we could be liable. If we condone something and something does happen, then like you suggested, the magnitude of millions of dollars would be at stake and at that point.
So, thank you for the information. You helped with giving us more clarity on this. We're going to continue this. That's what I heard from Ed.
That would be my motion, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Is there
My
a second?
colleagues.
Second.
So there's a motion and a second to continue this, and I had suggested that we could do this at our April 27th meeting, since we're already getting together. Does anybody have an objection to that on the council?
I don't.
Anyone?
I'm fine, Mr. Chairman.
Beautiful. So we have a motion and a second to continue this to our already scheduled meeting of April 27th. Is all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next item, Mr. Chairman, members of the Town Council, this is ordinance 2016-05. This is the second reading for adoption of this particular version of the ordinance dealing with solar energy systems.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we adopt the second reading for Chapter 27 taxation on this Article 2 tax exemption for solar energy systems.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Next item, ordinance 2016-06. This is the first reading for this particular ordinance, which would increase the number of Class BV limited licenses from 5 to 6.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the Class B Limited from 5 to 6.
So your motion is for first reading?
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry. Yep.
No problem.
Yep.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next ordinance is ordinance 2016-07. This is to establish fees and charges for fire department services. This is the first reading. You have recommendations provided by the town administrator and the fire chief.
Chief DeMello, if you could, I know that you and I have spoken about this, but I'd like if you could give us all clarity on what the proposal is.
Sure. So this really is just updating the current ordinance that was basically just address hazardous materials. So that nomenclature will stay in it. However, I think it's a good opportunity for us to provide codification to help us recoup some of the services that we provide to third-party insurers and things like that when we respond to some of these events.
So
Go ahead.
basically, we're just taking Section 12-35 as it exists, take it out, and we're going to put this whole new section in because it has a couple of additions to it.
Correct. The previous reading would basically stipulate it to just hazardous materials. And when we do bill for certain things now, when we're unsuccessful in recouping any of the costs, it's mostly because we don't have the proper language in the town code to do that.
So are you trying to say that you're going to go after an insurance carrier for a house fire?
Not necessarily, but that is potentially there. So one of the examples I gave is if we went to a facility and chemicals, pretty much anything destroys all the equipment that's there. The air packs, the turnout gear that the firefighters wear, you could be talking several $100,000, maybe even more. The intent is not to do that, is not to bill every single insurance company there, but this would also provide that opportunity should that need arise.
So if the cause of their chemicals affected our equipment, then we have just cause to kind of recoup for that money.
There was an example of a municipality where they were exposed to chemicals and the air packs were no longer usable. The turnout gear had to be thrown away, and several $100,000 worth of equipment. So then, where do you come up with that?
Well, that was recently, wasn't it?
It might have been in the past.
But I can't. I just want to be sure I understand the whole thing here. So, are you saying that if stuff is damaged, that you want to be able to recoup it, or if the fire department goes out to a fire, are you saying that if the house is insured, then the town should be reimbursed for that fire call?
Not necessarily.
But perhaps?
But perhaps. And I think really what is going to dictate is if it's over and above the normal response activities that we would do, we'd have that opportunity to do that.
I mean, I know this is just like a first draft of this, and I don't even know if I would call it a first reading, to be perfectly honest with you, from my perspective, but I'm trying to think about the, so on the emergency medical side, you bill the insurance company, if the person has insurance, for transporting, and is that in any case, that's any case, correct?
Correct.
And if there's no insurance involved, if the person doesn't have it, whatever, then there's no balance billing.
Correct.
So are you saying that you're trying to make an analogy to the fire service to that model?
I don't think the intent would be to bill every single instance. I think it would, when we look at and it's hard to describe what's routine, but when it's above our normal daily activities, I think it would behoove us to be able to recoup some of those costs.
See, I think that, my sense when I read through this is that if that's your intent, then that needs to be somehow clarified in the language, because you read this, and the very first sentence is, recipients of any of the following services rendered or performed by the town fire department: A, house fire, structure fire; B, automobile fire, truck fire, aircraft fire, unauthorized grass or brush fire, swimming pool, blah, 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 hazardous material. It sort of hits you like, wow, I'm paying tax, I mean, it just sort of hits you like, wow, do I have to worry about that if I have to call the fire department for something? And
I
you'd
think
rather,
if you read down a few
I-
paragraphs where it basically leaves it to the discretion of
yeah, I
the
mean,
fire department.
but there's also stuff on the directly benefits more than one person. The other thing I was also curious about is whether or not this is what one would call like model legislation, because I noticed that there's the fires caused by railroad trains, and since we don't have any railroad trains or railroads in Bristol, it seems like this was taken from something else, and maybe some of it needs to be refined a little bit more to us.
Yeah, we could. I mean, I had left that in there. I thought about taking that out, but you never know. So I opted to leave it in at the moment in time, but I can certainly redraft that and remove that particular.
Has the solicitor reviewed this already?
I have. And it is based on other communities. We've never had anything like this in Bristol.
No, obviously, no, I know that.
And as the chief stated, this pre-existed in our ordinance to your privy of under state code and law before this, of your discretion going forward, before you and your predecessor, just the fire chiefs in general, under that state statute. Isn't that correct?
The previous hazardous materials building, they used under the SARA legislation to bill for hazardous material response. So when we go to motor vehicle accidents, we'll bill for mitigation when there's fluids and stuff like that on the ground, so we'll bill for that. And that's where we noticed we were having issue recouping some of those costs because that SARA legislation doesn't necessarily apply to that. It applies to a bigger hazardous material incident. So we looked around, we talked to some other communities, both in-state and out-of-state, and this seemed to be the most common language that they were using.
Depending on how you look at it, we don't have railroads in Bristol, but we certainly do have some train wrecks every now and then.
We still got some tracks on High Street.
Yeah, so.
Chief, I'm in support of the ordinance in the first reading here, and I do like the Section D where the town retains the authority and the responsibility of, making changes if they want. I mean, the person can come in and based on the hardship, or you guys can work something out. It's not set in stone that, if they end up not having insurance or anything like that, they're going to be, punished with a certain hardship, that sort of thing. We're looking out for the citizen and everything else, but at the same time, we are doing our due diligence in regards to recouping what we can if we are damaged by the property through the insurance company.
That is correct. And same thing we handle with the EMS billing. If somebody comes in and they have the inability to pay, we essentially will work with them to address that hardship.
But I don't understand how they would even ever be a hardship, because if they don't have insurance to cover it, and there's no balanced billing, where does the hardship come in? They should never be receiving a bill. I thought that was the understanding that we had when the council passed the emergency medical side of it. Like, if you have insurance, it's one thing, and that's what you're trying to recoup, but I mean, if the person doesn't have insurance, why would there ever be a hardship that somebody would be on the hook to have to pay anything? It shouldn't be that you're going to work with any, because there should never be a hardship situation.
And a lot of times it's what happens is people will come in with a statement, and it's really, all intents and purposes, we're settling the confusion and telling them that there is no balance that you have to pay, and they're misinterpreting the statement that they receive, statement of benefits that you commonly receive from insurance.
But where was Tim, where were you reading that it said a hardship, or is that your language?
It's in Section D. It's in
yeah.
D, the last sentence of D, Mary.
Town reserves the right to waive charges in hardship cases. So, Section D. Thanks,
Well,
Frank.
I really would like someone to explain that to me, like why that would be in there if this is about billing insurance and not billing the individual.
So why don't we do this?
Because that would not need to be there.
Why don't we do this? I think it's a great point, and certainly this is first reading, so why don't we get clarity for our second reading on this, because if our goal is, and I believe it is, and please correct us if we're wrong here, but we're not looking to bill residents per se, we're looking to correctly recoup losses if they actually happen.
Correct.
And from those losses, we'd look to get them from the insurance company and not the individual. Is that?
That would be correct, and a lot of it, you have to remember, it's not all town residents. We have a lot of over-the-water, over-the-road transportation medium.
Okay.
So you'll have trucks and things like that.
So maybe you could, obviously with the solicitor, address those concerns for our second reading. because I do agree that if there is no, if our goal, maybe we can do what we've done with other ordinances, state our goal openly at the beginning of it. Our intention is to make sure that the town is not losing equipment for something that we should be getting recouped from the insurance company for.
Why would we, and this is where I always get like a little concerned sometimes, like we pass as a first reading something that we know is going to change, and I would say somewhat substantially in this case, potentially. Like, why do we do a first reading and not see the new version before we do the first reading? I mean, I know the answer is going to be to save time.
No, actually, the answer is that, quite honestly, at the second reading is where we are supposed to get into the meat and potatoes of it. But I think that this is significant, and anything significant like this should have a proposed change before the second reading. But at the second reading is where we're supposed to actually, right now, this dialogue that we're having, it should actually happen at the second reading. So, and then if we need to continue the second reading, we can at that point in time. So if you could address that concern that's already been expressed. Is there any other concern that we'd like to express for the second reading?
Well, I would like it to be, more relevant to like what the intent is, as you said, and also less when you're reading through it that, somebody like me is not coming up with, this must be a model ordinance from somewhere, because we have not had trains coming through Bristol in my lifetime that I can recall. So I think that we need to address that. Should the state decide to run a train down into Bristol, we can always address.
We'll amend the ordinance, is what you're saying?
Pardon me?
We'd amend the ordinance at that point in time?
we can always
At that
add
point
it
in
back.
time, if that should ever happen. But so I think those kinds of things. I mean, keeping in mind what the goal of this is, in that it's very, 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 very clear to the taxpayers who would not want to not call the fire department for something, because there's no room for misinterpretation. When somebody's looking at, like, I don't want to have to pay because I've got a little stove fire, and now it becomes a gigantic house fire, because no one will ever have to pay. And I just want to make sure that no one misinterprets this. Sure. So.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the first reading of the hazardous material response ordinance.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Well, I'm opposed just because I'd rather it be clearer in what we want to move forward at this point in time.
So that was 4 in favor, 1 opposed.
The next item, Mr. Chairman, members of the Town Council, this is sort of running alongside the previous ordinance. This basically adds one additional rate for the boat marine unit. This is the first reading. This is ordinance 2016-08.
Make a motion this constitutes the first reading.
Second.
There is a motion and a second, and I actually have a question. Is that this is a fee or rate change? Am I correct with that?
Additional rate.
Adding it on. It's adding it to the list.
We've done this with other fees and rates. Is it possible that we take this out of the ordinance so any future changes wouldn't require an ordinance change? Can we consider that? Would that be possible for our second reading? So if fees are if they have to be changed, we don't have to do an ordinance change on them?
Well, what we've done with some certain other things is that we basically leave the listing or a portion of the listing in the fee structure, and there'll be a note that says fees as established by the town council or something to that effect.
We can make that change.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay, and the next item is the licensing board new petitions. We have the petition of the DeWolf Tavern of 259 Thames Street, request a one-day expansion of service area for their existing BV liquor license and a one-day Sunday dancing and entertainment license for their third annual Oyster Festival on June 19th. There are certain other requests that are made in that petition, and you have recommendations provided by the town administrator, fire chief, and the zoning officer.
This has been a great event, going on its third year. And I would make a motion that we approve the request by the Dwarf Tavern for a one-day expansion of service area for a BV liquor license in that corridor that they're specifying in their application, along with their floor plan that they submitted to this council. Also attached, a one-day Sunday dancing and entertainment license. And this would be on June 19th, 2016, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Again, this is in conjunction as a fundraiser for the March of Dimes, a great fundraiser indeed. The only thing I would suggest, we make this approval, obviously, with all the department recommendations in the administration, but there is an approval from the Department of Community Development and our zoning officer that in the application, they're specifying signage to promote this event in, I would say, about 11 throughout the town. And our zoning ordinance only allows 3 in this district. So I would say that we approve this contingent that they get to put the sign on Thames Street where the location is. That would be 1 or maybe 2, but limit it to the 3 as the zoning provides us. And also the specified address on Hope Street where it's private property, which would be suitable, Diane, I would imagine, if that's okay. And this brings us to something that I would like to thank Dwarf Tavern for giving us their proposal and their plans and their signage and asking this council. I believe I'm not the only one, and maybe my colleagues would like to comment, or other departments, that throughout months, you drive throughout town, and I commend all the nonprofits and organizations that try to have fundraisers and events, but we often see a lot of signage pop up, and I know everybody's enthusiastic to promote their event, but it's nice when they come in front of us because they know the guidelines and know the restrictions, and then we can see what's suitable from there. So I just want to put that out there to be transparent as a little side note of a message from this town council.
Well, I would second the motion with a comment and one question. This has clearly been a very successful event, the 2 initial years, especially the first year. Last year you had some rain. But I think it's going to become a part of our pantheon of special events every year, and I hope that it is that successful and we keep doing it. But I did want to ask Gary one thing. Are there any elements in this that are different from what we've approved before, other than the signage one you've already discussed?
Good evening. There is none.
Could you state your name?
My name is Gary Senuick.
Welcome.
Well, thank you.
So it's pretty much the same permission as we've granted before?
Exactly. We would like at some point to increase the pole signage if we could. I know there's competition for other events, so we'd be willing to swap out, with those events.
So with that said, and again, I thank you for coming tonight to propose that. Would, at that stage, Diane, would it be for them to come before the council with the proposal or go to zoning first? How would that act? Or they could just come to this council and then just bypass zoning to have a special use permit?
Okay, I just wanted to ask what your definition of a pole sign. What's your definition?
Pole sign, we put flags up, pole flags, just like the 4th of July pole flags.
So
You mean
the banners?
The banners
that go up on
Correct.
the towns, or on the utilities poles?
Correct.
So that's coordinated through the town administrator's office, and there's no other permission that needs to be issued?
Well, Diane, do we have a general policy on those? I mean, those signs, those pole flags are very effective, but do we have a general policy on the control of those?
Those are issued through the town administrator's office, and
So, Tony, is there a general policy on that?
Yes, we do. And as he pointed out, they only allow 3 because they're not a town-sponsored organization. They are a private organization. And we have to incur the cost of having the employees go out and post them. That's why we limit so that they're not all over town. We're not putting up 10, 20 of those. But we certainly encourage and are very supportive, and all they need to do is just come in, let us know, when they would like to have them up and provide those. Then I just forward those to the Department of Public Works with a request for them to install them.
So I take it the petitioner would make his own sign.
Correct. The town is not responsible for those.
Would need to come into the town administrator's office to see whether they first of all, can fit the schedule and whether they're approved to be put up.
That is very true. So it's best to contact the administrative assistant. Just contact my office, and we can then provide to make sure there's no conflict.
And I would
that we
assume
don't have
that
too many banners
the
out
request
there.
would also want to be poll by poll. I mean, whether they're going to use a lot of polls or certain ones of them.
Well, I think that was,
I think you would
that was the
consider-
point, was saying that there's only a maximum of
consider
3
5?
because of the cost incurred and the time incurred, and obviously if we're doing that with, we're all, I think you hear unified support
How many
for your...
polls are there for the 4th of July, for example?
I have no idea, honestly. I would have to get that number from
Upwards of a
DPW.
lot.
Yes, there's,
It strikes me
definitely.
that,
But
just looking for the future, it strikes me that an arbitrary limit of 3 maybe isn't appropriate, because it depends a lot on how big the event is and the need of it. I don't see why we have to say 3 is standard. I admit that you don't want to do too many because of the work, but I would suggest that we maybe refine the policy and leave the number open to the town administrator's office to select.
Well, right now, it's a goodwill gesture that we do, placing 3 of them, because we incurred the expense of time, labor, to put these
No,
up.
but I guess my question of you is the policy such that you never would grant more than 3?
For private organizations, that's correct, only 3.
But I think that I agree with Halsey in this respect. Like, I didn't realize what he was talking about, but when you're looking at those, part of the effectiveness of them is not that you're driving along and there's a 1. It's that you've got 1, 2, 3. Do you know what I mean? That you kind of see them in case you miss 1. It would be easy to miss 1, I think, of just hanging there. That I think the impact of these kinds of things is when there's a couple of them and you see them kind of together. So I think that it would not be unreasonable to go up to, let's say, 5 of them, perhaps. But I don't know if there's, and I know that this is a fundraiser, so I'm just throwing out ideas here, but, to me, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of organizations that come in with these kind of signs.
They do. No, they do. They just don't come through you here, but they come and knock and says, okay, am I next? We could dedicate pretty much a bucket truck and 2 employees installing quite a few of these banners. I mean,
Everybody, one at a time, please.
To target the, that's where I was going to go. I mean, to pay the hourly rate, if there was an hourly rate, if this means you're going to sell, $300 or $500 more tickets, and it's going to cost $150 to do it, then it might be worthwhile up to the organization. I would put a maximum number. I wouldn't do more than 5 or 6, but 3 seems kind of like the small number to me for this. Could we charge them if they wanted that? They might be able to get a sponsor.
We'd be willing to infer the cost for the installation.
We have to be very careful when we go down that path, okay? Because even if we charge, are we going to dedicate 2 employees and a bucket truck to go out and begin to install? So now we're going to have to add additional staff, because now we're tying up 2 employees. Because I can tell you, I've got quite a few requests that folks come in and say, sorry, but we're just not going to be able to accommodate that. But we do have quite a few requests, so that's why we do a goodwill. We install 3 of them, and we try to be strategic, where we positioned them, 1 at the entrance on the 2 sides and 1 on Matagam.
I just wanted to jump in because that sort of dovetails with my point. The zoning ordinance allows these off-premise signs to announce an event. Nonprofits get 3. And the idea was that you'd put 1 at each entrance to the town, 1 at the bridge, 1 at Hope and Metacom coming from Warren. And we also allow commercial venues who are having like an open house or some sort of an event. I believe theirs can stay up for 2 weeks prior to the event. So we have to, I think, just think about, this is a nonprofit, but if we have a commercial venue that wants to do an open house or a ribbon cutting or something, we just have to look at it for everybody to be the same.
This is not the banner across the street. These are the ones that are hanging on each side.
Right, and the poles.
Correct.
Right.
And so when we did the ordinance, we recognized that a lot of the nonprofits will put up A-frame signs, and so we said, 1 at each entrance. But we also had to be fair, we had to put something in the ordinance to address the commercial enterprises that have their banners across their building for, whatever promotion they've got. I think we say up to 4 times a year, 2 weeks prior to the event. so that they can, I guess I'm just cautioning you that if you're going to do something for the nonprofits, think about the commercial enterprises that might also want the same.
Right, we'd have to.
Well, that's why I initially opened up to the need a special use permit and utilize our zoning board, but no disrespect that I didn't know that you had so many requests. But to your point, Tony, it also goes to, I see the need and desire because this is a yearly event. It's very successful. I think the support is there, but the uniform policy of what this might entertain going forward and contradict all our zoning because of the difference between, what event and what might come forward. I'm more than willing to entertain a conversation going forward if we feel there's a need for a policy change in conjunction. Talking with the town administration, the community development, and even the Department of Public Works who might be involved that might incur a cost to the town. I'm more than willing to have that in the future. But I certainly hope you understand our position at this moment. So,
Kevin, did you want to add something?
No, actually, just to highlight a couple of things. One, we look at this as a public service, and that's what we're here to do, to support the community. So, when you're looking at it from that perspective. However, Tony's correct in that we do incur tying up several guys, and also if we're working on Hope Street, we need to have a flagger. We need to do this properly and safely. And the only other thing I would ask is that all of these folks that really like these banners, in which they are good, take a look at them. When you drive in and out of town, at some of these, you can't read them when you're traveling the travel speed on the road. So, they don't really highlight what they should because you can't read them while you're driving. And that's one thing to point out from a safety perspective. But the only thing I ask is if we have the dates that they need to go up to comply with zoning, we need to know a couple of days ahead of time so we can make sure we can meet what the requestee is asking us to do so we get them up. And then they're up for a certain amount of time. That's one thing I don't have a good handle on. So from a zoning perspective, based on the type of request, maybe we could fine-tune that form they fill out so that when it gets pushed down to us, we just know when to put them up and when to take them down, and then we can plan for that on our work schedule.
Well, I wonder if there's, I don't know if there's anything that would prohibit it. I mean, I've just seen them recently about another event in Bristol and then in other towns for summer. I mean, more like the lawn signs, like campaign, the small ones that just go into the ground like a few weeks beforehand, and they're relatively inexpensive. I mean, could organizations such as this put that on private property like 2 weeks before to announce that? And
Yes,
then you'd see several of them coming along Metacom or Hope Street that way. You know what I'm talking about? Like the
Lawn signs on private property, we don't regulate. As long as they're on private property and where we end up getting some enforcement issues is because people don't necessarily understand that their property doesn't go all the way to the edge of the pavement. The pavement is within the right-of-way, and there's a setback to their property line. So if it's near the street, the code compliance officer will collect it from you. It has to be definitely on your lawn.
So before, we've gone very far off topic here, but still kind of on topic. So we have a motion and a second. So and we are discussing this, and the motion and the second is to approve. But
go ahead.
With all the recommendations from all the departments that actually weighed in on this, and I would say moving forward, certainly this is a topic that we need to spend some more time on. Maybe, Mr. Administrator, you could share with this council at a future, maybe at the next council, what kind of requests are you getting? Is it appropriate what we're currently doing? Should we be looking at something else? Is there a better way to do what we do? And if in fact we do, those employees putting those signs up, what does that actually cost? Just in a big picture kind of way. And if they're not working, if they're doing that, they're not doing something else. So,
Right.
Which is of course the big picture on all this. This council, this town wants you to be successful, because I can see where this is going in just a moment here. So, and then moving forward, if there is a better way to do what we do, great, let's take a look at that. So.
If I may try to accommodate your situation beforehand, before we take this up going forward, getting back, I don't have the ordinance in front of me, but it was specified that at a private residence, that the owner of DeWolf at 474 Hope and State, if he was to do what Councilwoman Perilla said in that fashion of a sign, would it then give them more opportunity to have 3 outside of that scope of the signs at that private residence, a private property?
They'd probably even put stuff on the fence.
So that basically, if they put one on State, one on Hope, and then give you 3, that would be like a total of 5 to try to accommodate what my colleagues are trying to
The more the merrier.
accomplish. But I need to direct to Director of Community
Could you refer that to my department? I'd like to
Yeah.
sit down with Ed and the code compliance officer. I don't have the ordinance in front
Me
of me
neither,
either.
so-
And I think that you all know that we do our very best job at trying to avoid a proliferation of these kinds of signs.
Yeah. Yes.
While I respect
Yeah.
that you're wanting to help this event, I just want to make sure that we don't send them down the wrong path and then we have an issue.
I agree.
Well, I
It's
think
just an
that's right. You
idea.
need to review it, and then I think after the review, it should be published so that we're even-handed and everybody understands it. And I think the point raised about giving sufficient warning to DPW is absolutely necessary, because you can't expect them to snap to it in 5 minutes. They've got to have a little time to plan.
So, Ed, would you amend your ordinance, your motion, if you believe you want to refer also to ask our community development to give us some additional background along with the administrator?
Well, I would make that motion, but
Yes,
It's
through
already-
administration, the Director of Community Development, her department, need be, by their guidance, but at current, where my motion is only specifying 3, with what I mentioned in my motion, that is documented here tonight, but need be if it's directed from their recommendation that that private property can add to and then go outside the scope of 3 to give you a total of 5, only contingent on their approval to this council that you would be notified. Is that correct, Michael, in my motion?
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe-
Okay. And Halsey, is there a
It
second?
might look like a banner.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We look forward to your event.
We do.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay, the next item is the request of Ben Luke from Bristol Buffet LLC, doing business as Bristol Buffet, 180 Mount Hope Avenue, request council consideration for a Class BV limited intoxicating beverage license. This would be to call for a public hearing on May 4th.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Before we move forward, if I could just share with everybody some breaking news. We have a new chief marshal, I was just told. He was just announced. It's Oki Falco is our new chief marshal. Isn't that just wonderful?
I thought that would be a great choice for her to make.
Oki's a lifelong Bristolian. He's a member of our fire department and rescue. He's a member of the Police Firearms Memorial. No, I don't know this by memory. I'm reading. He's obviously part of the 4th of July Committee. Elks, he is the co-founder of Pop Warner League. I did not know that.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know
and
that.
he obviously coached there, and I was also told he's an all-around nice guy. So,
Yeah, he is.
so congratulations, Oki. Well-deserved.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good,
That's great.
very good, yeah.
The next item, this was a review of the previously granted one-day Sunday dancing entertainment licenses for Roberto's. You have some recommendations provided by the fire chief and chief of police and the town administrator. That's item E1.
Upon all the recommendations for the dates specified with all the departments and administration and codes, I make a motion to approve the dates as submitted by the applicant.
Well, it was actually this was
I noticed-
a review.
Just a review.
Just a review, because I saw an added date after what we approved the last time. That's why I just figured I would make the motion as a whole.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay, the next is the dog kennel license renewals for 2016-17, and you have the recommendation of the town administrator and chief of police.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the dog kennel license renewals as stated.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
And we have the updated roster of the special constables / fire police.
Motion to approve the 2016 roster of the constables and fire police as submitted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next item is Councilman Stewart's request for an update on Tanyard Brook project, continued from March 9th. You have a subsequent correspondence provided by the town administrator regarding Beta Group report and concerning the same.
Actually, that attachment there, the supporting document, does not apply to Tanyard Brook. That goes to the water pollution drainage, and it gives you a more update schedule. As you can see, there are some changes there. This is the drainage from the sewer plant that will go through Fairview, right to the waterfront. So as you can see, it's much more updated because there were some issues there, and I was just bringing this back to you so that you would be informed, as you can see on the schedule on the third page.
So that is the Fairview Drive project, right?
That's
This
the
one?
water pollution drainage,
Yeah,
yes, which
on
goes
Fairview
through
Drive.
Fairview, correct.
So to keep in accordance...
When do you anticipate that'll be completed?
Well, here, per the schedule right here, okay, you're looking at 2018, June of 2018 is being the final paving, although the work will be taking place through 2017.
And weren't there some issues on that?
I think one of the things that ought to be considered there is we've had an awful lot of complaint, I guess I'd put it, about that street. And I think it'd be a very bad shame if we tear it up and leave it open through a wintertime.
No, I'm sure they will not be open, you know. That would not be the case. I mean, even though say the final paving, they still have to put the binder, the original, you know, so that's not going to happen.
I thought the earlier plan from Beta was that this would all be done during this current year.
Well, we're looking at, 2017 construction. I'm sure that we can address that at that particular time.
It's not that big a job. It's just a matter of opening a street and putting in a pipe and closing up the street and paving.
But aren't they saying that they're saying CRMC has said this is going to a more complicated project. That's the point of
Correct,
this
because
letter,
of the
right?
drainage
Right.
and onto the bay. So the process is really through CRMC and DEM.
Right.
That's what's really the holdup.
Well, I would urge that the element of Fairview be looked upon as a part of an overall picture, because if you could do that cleanly and get it all repaved to the satisfaction of those residents, that would be very good, even if the outflow and a few other detailed considerations has to be done later.
So could I just ask one other question, Tony? Okay. Go ahead,
Okay,
sorry.
but right now, are you saying that there are issues right now with the road itself? Is that what you're saying?
No,
Because
I'm
it was
just saying
addressed.
that I think when you plan this project,
Right.
there are indeed, as you're suggesting, elements to it. There's the elements at the plant, there's the pipe through the road,
Right, two sets
there's the
of pipes.
crossing of under Ferry Road, and there's the outlet.
Right.
But the part that I know is going to be troubling for the residents of the Fairview is if that isn't done with dispatch as one clean element of the whole process. And I would urge that that be done this year, because that's what those residents expect.
But you can't do that without starting at the plant, okay, to do the hookup. You can't lay out all the pipes and then pave the road.
Yes, you can. You can put a pipe in, you don't have to use it yet. All I'm suggesting is I think the schedule should be looked at and arranged so that the part of the street is done with dispatch start to finish as a sort of a separate element of the overall project.
And I'm sure that's going to be taken into consideration as they move through the project. I'm positive that they will be considerate of all the residents in the area. But the thing is, when you're saying lay out the pipes, you got to remember that part of this is to upgrade the sewer system. So this is not just say, okay, let's do a hookup here, then we'll continue in a sewer plant.
Well,
So
I think
there is
I've made
more
my
to this.
point that we should not leave those residents who've been so troubled in the past
Right.
in limbo with a long, drawn-out process that is opening the street. Because I've done a lot of pipe jobs in this town over the years, and I know you can select portions of a job, get it done, and then you work on the other elements that feed into it or feed out of it.
I'm going to leave that part to the professionals, but I can assure you we'll be monitoring. They're very close to create the least inconvenience.
Could I just ask you a question, Tony?
Sure.
I've heard some discussion by some of the residents in terms of some of the plan coming in, what might have been, I can't recall if it's like a paper road or what have you. I mean, going through, or easements that may be needed going through people's property to get between the plant and street. Have those issues been resolved, or are they still ongoing?
As far as I'm concerned, that's no longer an issue. That's not a consideration. That was actually an access, not a road. It was simply a second access to the plant. But going forward, the need to address the drainage there is more important than that. Although, it's unfortunate if we cannot provide a second access in case in the future we ever have an emergency that we can get in through the main entrance.
So are we still pursuing the second?
That's not necessarily something we're really pushing very hard on. Initially, it was proposed in it was partially my fault. I used the word road. It really was not to be a road. It was simply access, a second access to the plant in case of an emergency, and not to be used on a regular basis, but only if the area on Wood Street would be flooded, which occasionally has happened, and we get as much as 18 to 20 inches of water on the Wood Street area.
So I guess my question is that still being discussed with the residents in that?
It has to,
or is it not yet? Because it really affects like just a couple of residents, right, that section?
Well, it does impact only a couple of them, that's correct. But this has to go back. We need to meet with the residents again and share with them where we are in the process and to move forward.
But I think to answer Mary's question directly, this plan does not include that additional access road. It does not include it.
That is correct.
So, Mr. Chairman, getting back to what the clerk specified to the council agenda H1, which is an update on the Tanyard Brook, not the supplemental information of the beta report, not to disregard the residents of Fairview, but since we're on this and my colleagues made all their comments, the only comments I will make on it is the CRMC, along with the Rhode Island DM. It's discouraging and disappointing that throughout the processes, here we are again with a project that's going to be out of a timeline due to a Category B assent. Why they can't just assess this and figure it out from the first time is discouraging, and I would just request, getting back to the councilwoman's request about those easements, I noticed in your supplemental documentation that one resident was looking to, and if I read it correctly, selling the easement portion. If you could just provide this council with the negotiation of any initial stages that might take place in consideration of this project, it would be much appreciated going forward outside of this meeting.
Oh, okay.
Okay? But getting back to H1, Tanyard Brook update.
With the 10-yard...
We have a new chairman. Nicely done.
With the 10-yard brook update at this point, we have the construction easement was drafted. Then there was a little mix, a little hitch there because I thought it had gone out, but it had not been reviewed to go out to the residents. Well, since then it has, and it's in the process of being forwarded to all of the residents that we already have met, which are about approximately 18, 20 that we have met with. And we currently still have a few others that they've been very difficult to reach. We've sent 2 registered letters. Cheryl has made some phone calls, but at this point, if I have to enlist the support of our good compliance officer, I might need to do that to make sure that we reach out to these folks and we get them here, or we may have to notify them and says, well, you have no interest to go forward, to meet with us, but we need to go forward with the project. So we made every attempt, I should say just about every attempt to reach to the remainder of those folks because they actually putting things on hold at this point.
So from March 9th, I believe that was the same number, 8 residents out of 37 that needs to be contacted that is holding up the easement process that you're referring to that you need contact for. And by these registered letters, you're saying now that you'll be a little more vigilant contacting those residents to get the total whole of the 37 residents for the culvert and any easements, because as Beta had suggested, at this point any permitting should have been going out at this time, even though we discussed as a council and with our treasurer, it's our responsibility to come up with the funding going forward, which will be a challenge in itself. But outside of the funding, I believe myself and my colleagues, and I think you said you're supportive of keeping a timeline on this project and entertaining any expediting that we can get this going so all the paperwork and draft plans can go out and we could be prepared going forward. Just to mention on this, after review, Councilman Herreshoff, the last meeting, also made comments referring to Phase 3. And I'm still going to agree with Councilman Herreshoff that, going forward, I think Phase 3 should be looked at even a little more profoundly for any storage in that field, because it could actually be a temporary fix going forward with the State Street Reservoir and Mount Hope Avenue. We're over here spending millions of dollars on culverts in people's private properties, but that's another discussion we could take part after this. But just the timeline, I would just ask you, Tony, that we get those 8 people on board so we can have Kevin come in front of us the next time to make sure that all the paperwork is going in the process. It should be going for the timeline. Thank you.
I'd just like to say, Mr. Chairman, I commend Councilman Stewart for focusing on all these problems, because it's very annoying they go so slowly. Let me just, as an aside, if you indulge me a moment, mention something that was in the paper last few days. 1/3 of the DOT budget, 1/3 goes to consultants. They never seem to be able to get these designs done and approved. Things lay on people's desks for months and years sometimes. In the real world, they shouldn't be spending near as much on all of this bureaucratic process. They should be spending more money on the digging up the streets and paving things. It's a terrible situation to spend 1/3 on just consultants. That's why these things go so slowly.
I agree. So, to Councilman Stewart's point, besides these residents, what else is pending?
That's it.
Once we speak with these residents and get their, we'll call it agreement, so we find a middle zone, if whatever, then...
Well, there's 2 pieces to that. One is the initial construction easement that goes out, and they review it to make sure that they're in agreement. If they're not, then they'll be back meeting with us again to negotiate, okay, what's acceptable for us to get that easement, the construction easement. So that would be step 1. Step 2 would be to do that. Then once we've cleared the hurdles, then they can begin to complete the final draft of the project to go out. Okay. So you're really looking at 3 steps here before we can get to that step of saying, okay, we can put this out, we get a final draft so that they can come and present, this is what the project is going to look like, until we can work out the details with each one of the residents. But I can assure you, it's not for lack of trying. We've been trying pretty hard. Chasing these folks down, it hasn't been easy, especially when we have some of the owners that are absentee owners. They don't even live in state. So it hasn't been easy. It's not one of those we could knock right on the door and says,
How many
we need to meet up with you.
8 or so are out of state?
I would say at least 3 of them are, 3, possibly 4, out of those.
And where are the others? They live somewhere else, or they live in the house?
In one instance, we have an elder lady who just says, my husband passed away, I have no interest in meeting with you. Straight out. I even called her and she said, I don't want to meet with you. What are you doing?
We certainly have an ulterior plan if there's no forward progression there, correct? So we don't have an option to say no here, and what I mean by that is we must then find another way to accomplish what we want to get done.
And I haven't given up on that one yet.
Okay.
And to end the Tanyard Brook discussion, Councilman Sweeney, I believe they are clearing that park out at the corner of Wood and Hope, so that's on schedule.
I was going to share that. That was one of my updates.
Well, I just wanted to include him because he had that concern along with Halsey.
Right. They are. It's looking pretty nice, actually. They're putting up the wall, and it's going to look pretty nice once it gets through the entryway there, into Hope and Wood.
Bright side. Positive spin.
So again, we're at this juncture, Tony, 2 months. How would you like to do a timetable going forward?
I would say let's at least 2 more meetings before we come back. if I have something, actually, if I have something at the next meeting, I'll be here anyway. So
That should be
if
May
you'd like to
25th,
keep it
if
on,
I'm
that's
correct.
fine, but...
That would be May 25th, I believe, it's May 4th is our next meeting. So why don't we, if you're okay?
Motion to continue this item to May 25th? you
Yes.
said,
Second.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, perfect. There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next item is item H2. This is Councilman Stewart's request for status of the response to the correspondence to the Rhode Island Department of Transportation letter requesting their attendance at a workshop on pending projects. The town administrator provides further correspondence relating to this, and also there was a letter received not in time for this agenda, but they did finally reply.
We did get their attention, in two ways. One, in person, and the other one, obviously, by communication, and they certainly very willing to come and make a presentation.
So going forward from this previous letter, I know we don't have it, Tony, but...
We'll provide you a copy, though.
Yeah, and how we can coordinate that exact date, and I would like my colleagues' opinion if you would like them at a council meeting or put into...
Personally, I would like it at a council meeting so the residents could hear it.
Okay.
I
Thank
agree.
you.
And I think from on the second page of their letter, should the town still wish to hold a meeting regarding either of these two projects, representatives from RIDE, traffic, and highway sections will be available to attend.
Perfect.
You might specify, should, when you talk to them, say, that was our letter of request of we do.
So we finally got communication. They were somewhat apologetic at the very beginning, though.
So we're going to ask them to be at the 25th council meeting or the...
The 4th or the 25th would
Okay.
seem to be appropriate to me. Let's check their schedule, and one of
Great.
those two, whatever is the better one for them, is fine. Would you not agree?
So we'll refer this to you, Tony, to specify the date that is given to you by the Rhode Island DOT of either May 25th or June 4th going forward.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay, the next item, Mr. Chairman, members of the Town Council, is from the Treasurer regarding the report on the Maritime Center project. This was continued from March 30th.
So this is going to be continued. Again, I did speak with Julie today. As you can see, that the treasurer couldn't be here tonight. But she did share, and I asked for an update for this council. Art Night is May 5th. And if you're wondering why the heck I'm saying that as this pertains to our harbor and maritime center, it's because the soft opening, if you will, is the Art Night will be there on May 5th, and the public is welcome. There's no fee to get in. You're going to see our new harbor center or maritime center that's almost completed.
Awesome.
Talking about what is done and what is not done. Exterior is likely to be completed by the May-June area, which includes the harbor master's office will be finished as well at that point in time. We're still waiting on the final word for what is possible for the walls on the harbor side, so the west side, if you will. So far, it seems we may be able to do some preventive maintenance, but the real work, the $100,000 that we've been talking about, there will be no great way to modify this. This is based on the preliminary discussions with Rick Hall, and we don't have a formal answer. So, simply put, most will be done. It'll be safe and good-looking for May 5th. We have a meeting on May 4th, so we'll say this again for Art Night, and encourage people to come down and see the new Harbor Center and a glimpse of the future and what it should bring to the community. And that's actually wonderful stuff. So if you are available, and make it a point to come down and see the new Harbor Center. There's been so much discussion about this. This is not only a wonderful improvement for the building because it's our building and we must keep them safe, but it's also an opportunity for an economic development. So that's as much as I have right now. We'll continue this to our next meeting so Julie can speak a little bit more about it. Can I have a motion to continue the next meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second for discussion.
With the remark that
Go ahead.
the main thing is to hold the line on the spending. We don't want them to tack on a bunch of extra things at the end that run us over.
Halsey, we could not be in more agreement on that.
Mr. Chairman, the facilities will be all done, too, by that time, or showers?
The showers will be done, the interior will be almost done. The harbor master's office is kind of tucked over on the west side, and it will not be completed.
Okay.
It'll be at a portion of completion, but the bathrooms will be done, and the hall will be done, obviously, and there will be beautiful pictures and other pieces of art there.
Looks beautiful so far. Yeah.
So I know there was a lot of time, energy, and effort on this project as a whole. There's a lot of expectations, anticipation. It's going to be utilized, with Art Night, which is a great grand opening. And there's many other projects that will intertwine, such as extending the boardwalk eventually in the future, a marina, hopefully acquisition of that building at the end of Thames Street for the future of Bristol. During budget deliberations, this council was posed with some ideas with the closing of our visitor center here at the Burnside Building right here in downtown Bristol, some ideas of, reopening it with staff, a cost associated with it. It's just my opinion of when I'm thinking about the Maritime Center and people with ideas to put things in there is, when summertime is everyone's down by the harbor, is maybe to save a little money of, if we're not going to have a visitor center, if that's the consensus of this council, is to have a kiosk in the Maritime Center as a visitor center itself in conjunction with a Maritime Center, as a vocal visiting point building there on the harbor and be guided with our nice way finding signage, just like people would find the Burnside building. Also, speaking of the new Chief Marshal of the Bristol 4th of July Parade, the 4th of July Committee has always said, and it's been accommodating with the Burnside also, where people can see artifacts of that committee, of the hard work and many years of history surrounding Bristol and its 4th of July. Maybe we can have such topics of that, of maybe housing a little museum in the Maritime Center of our great 4th of July. This is just ideas that I thought of when going over the Maritime Center. I'm just putting it out there for my colleagues, administration, and the residents to just think about it. So, thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
There's a motion and a second to continue. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay, the next item is regarding Clean Bristol, put on the council agenda by Councilman Harrisoff, continued by from March 30th.
Well, I would just say that I'm grateful for the expression at the most recent council meeting that a plan is being developed to enhance the more frequent cleaning of the town streets. Has there been some further development of that plan?
Yes, there has been, and I'll let Director McBride fill us in on that.
Yes, real quick, we've ordered some equipment to go along with that, as I mentioned during the last council meeting, so that we can utilize not just in the downtown area, but town-wide should we need it.
Good.
I don't have an actual delivery date. I think within the next couple of weeks we'll have it, and we'll get that on the books and scheduled to do that, and figure out how often we need to do that based on need. So I think we'll have accomplished the council's goal to address some of these areas that have come to light over the last few weeks. And certainly I look forward to incorporating that into the daily or weekly routine as we go forward.
Well, thank you for that. And, Mr. Chairman, I would like to, with the permission of the council, continue this matter for further description of the development of that plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next item was also continued from March 30th. This has to do with what the chairman considered a future bonding conversation. You have also provided for this evening's agenda a report from the treasurer.
Would you like to speak for the treasurer, Tony?
Yeah, I'll do both.
Okay.
Yes, I'll be more than glad to do that. The reports from the treasurer actually states how much we've actually borrowed or referendum bonded for 2006 and 2012, just to visit those numbers, was 2006 was 15 million, which was 15,000, 15 million, and 2012 was 9 million. And obviously, there's different breakdowns for road repairs, public safety, public buildings, sewer, open space, and drainage. I don't know, do you want me to visit all of those items?
So what is being proposed here is a total dollar figure of 17? Am I reading this correctly?
Okay, there's two pieces. The one from Julie, from the treasurer, specifically just states what we had borrowed and what we have on hand that we did, that's available, but we did not borrow because of the debt rate. So we obviously didn't want to put ourselves, especially this year, as we all aware of the predicament with the budget. So we obviously haven't tapped into that. So that is the carried over from those bonds.
Gotcha.
Now, what the other piece, the other communication from me is actually proposing going forward for a 3 to 5 year outlook. And the request is there's 5 items there for a total of 17. And that's just proposed for discussion, obviously, at the council. But in conversation with all the departments involved on this, Julie, Diane Williamson, Director, Kevin McBride, Ed Tanner, and Greg Marsili, what we're proposing is $5 million for road repairs, public safety, nothing, public buildings, $1 million, marina, $2 million, open space, $2 million, and drainage, $7 million. And keeping in mind, and I went through each one of those, with the marina, as we all aware of, we have the engineering being done currently. So the total cost, the exact cost, is not known at this time. However, in discussion with Diane, Greg, and myself, we felt that we should put some money in there because as we know, that we have folks who are waiting for space. We know that can be a revenue generator, so we feel that we need to put some money into the bond for that. Then obviously road repairs, as we are aware of the great need of many of our roads. This year, we're still going to be able to do some of the work through the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. However, our own that we had $1 million, we could have borrowed, but again, that would increase the debt rate, so we did not at this point. That's the $1 million that's there that you see. Then public buildings, much maintenance has been deferred. And actually on this one here, if you walk into the Burnside building, was one of the buildings that the roof was done. The interior is currently being done right now. If you walk in there, you would never know it's the same building. They're in the process of patching and doing the painting, so it's looking pretty nice. But like Burnside, we've done at the DPW, we did the roof, we did the gate there, we did garage doors, because at one point the water was just dripping right inside the building. So much of it has been deferred, and we need to address that. And I mean, look, right here, the town hall is another one that we need to address, the safety, just in technology overall here in the town hall. So much is needed for the public buildings. Open space is, as you know, we've been very proactive as a group, as a team. We've been very supportive, and we have gone through, acquiring quite a bit of property in town, or much of it that we're concerned about developing in certain areas. And so I would suggest that we continue to be proactive. And then the drainage, as we are very much aware, it's not just the 10-yard brook, and we have to leverage the funds, as we just talked about. What's the update? Currently, we've invested $400,000 in the engineering. We have invested. So we certainly are not going to take that and put it on a shelf and just let it create dust. We need to continue. That is the appetite of all of us, is to continue with that project. But in order to leverage any grant funding that we may have, we need to have something on hand as well. And that's the reason why I propose $7 million on that.
So, if I may, before any comments on this, a couple things to remind everyone. Number one, when this would, if if this council decided that we saw the value in this dollar figure, and it's a referendum to the voters of Bristol, this does not mean that the money is spent.
That's correct.
I know that we all know that, but I think it's worth saying it again, is that this is not spending this money. This gives the opportunity to spend it when appropriate. So just because drainage, for example, is the largest dollar figure here, says $7 million proposed, doesn't mean that when it passes, we receive a check for $7 million and start paying on a loan for that. It means that the opportunity is there when appropriate. For example, in 10-Yard Brook Phase 1, there were federal dollars, a lot of federal dollars that we took advantage of because we were ready to do so. We often talk about shovel-ready projects. That's what we're talking about here, is that when the opportunity presents itself, that we're ready, willing, and able to take advantage of them. So again, this is not spending the money. This is saying to the voters of Bristol, whatever dollar figure we believe is correct to move forward, to put on the referendum. But something that we may not know. This was a timeline that is right now. I had asked to have this on the last agenda. We need to move on this expeditiously. Our bond counsel, Sandy Mack, said that we still have enough time, but very little time. So it's very important that we kind of move forward with this, whatever we feel is correct. So, Counsel.
Mr. Chairman, I have an important aspect of this whole thing. My first question is, the proposed $17 million that would be entertained to the taxpayers that you described, is that including the existing authorization of how our treasurer laid out to this council of $3 million from drainage, 1.4, close to 1.5 for open space, 1.6 for public buildings, and $1 million for road repairs? Should we assume that that's incorporating on those total amounts, or are those separate and apart of what we're asking for on top of what is already authorized by the borrowing from the last bond?
Separate and apart.
Okay.
So additional monies.
That's correct,
okay.
Yes. And, it's pretty evident, as the chairman pointed out, this is not, and we've been very prudent, as you can see. We didn't just spend it because we had it. We spend it when it's needed. And it was pointed out, this is more like a home equity. You only use it when you need it. You don't tap in unless it's necessary. Mm. And I think all of us have been very prudent and very cautious. I mean, you've stated before with the Maritime Center, so we watch every penny here, it's not just a matter of let's spend, but let's do it prudently.
Tony, we took a huge hit with the schools, obviously, this year. It's no joke. So we move forward with these bonds, but what I'm worried about is the debt. You know what I mean? I don't want us to be in that debt ratio. So can you give me a little light into what that means? You said the $1 million road. It was something you referenced, the roads. It's $1 million bond or something.
Well, that's.
But as the chair pointed out, that it really, just because the residents or the voters approve it, we're not going to. So it doesn't impact the debt rate until we begin to borrow on that money.
Right.
So unless we tap into it, it's just like, again, going back to home equity. You don't take the money out, you don't pay interest on it, and likewise, this is the same thing.
I guess I'm trying to understand what that debt ratio is. Well, how much can we spend, can we not spend, that sort of thing, where we start, overshooting.
That's the reason why we did not borrow that $1 million this year, because we did not want to impact. We looked at what we currently had already, paying that, interest, and that's what we use, and actually for the purchase of lights and many other projects, so we were very cautious.
Okay. Well, I'd just like to say, listening to the town administrator and to Tim, I agree with Tim. We're in a very serious time now where we're going to, if we don't get things changed with the schools, we're going to have expenditures way over the cap. The tax rate's going to go up, much to the dismay of everybody at this table. It's not the time to incur a lot of new obligations, and I think that I have a lot of trouble voting for a $17 million total. I think we've got to sharpen our pencil. Also, I agree with Tim. We've got to look at getting a full understanding of what we're doing. You say that money might not be spent. Well, if you look back over the record of the years, say even the last 30 or 40 years, you'll find that most of these obligations that we take on by voted amounts do get spent. Not the first year, not the second year, but they get spent. And so we got to look at this pretty carefully. And you know how much, no matter how much you think you want when you enumerate A, B, C, D, and E adding up to 17 million, some of those things can be stretched out. And I think we should reduce the total to those things that are most important and not go quite that hog wild with, I mean, the debt service on 17 million eventually spent is a very large number, and I think we need to have the treasurer explain to us what that debt service would be if all those monies were borrowed over the next few years.
Well, I think that the thing that we do, I mean, I think we try, it doesn't always work out perfectly, but, you know, we do try to not take on a big obligation until something is paid off.
That's
and I think
correct.
Julie has been good about providing us with the schedule of when things will be paid off and so forth. So, I mean, I think it's a credit that when you look at what we have left in some of these, like I had kind of looked at this myself. I came out, I was trying to see where our big differences are. Mine came out to just about a little under 10 million. But I think that the drainage is one of the big differences. And
That's correct.
if we're, Tanyard Brook is a big project. We've talked about drainage. And the one thing I will say, when I came back on the council about 10 years ago, when we first started with some of the drainage bonds, I think we knew that what we really needed for that was closer to $20 million for that for drainage in this town. And I think we ended up with maybe $3 or $4 million at the time, if I remember correctly. And we've tried to sort of do it incrementally with small amounts. This Tanyard Phase 2 is a big project. If we move on to Phase 3, we have been fortunate in getting a lot of grants to offset that, but you do have to be prepared to be able to do the match. And that's where this comes in. And that's where we've been very fortunate in open space, for example. Having that money, and there's some large properties in town that you never know what might happen and need to be prepared for that. So I'm a little, you know, I don't think I thought it would come in anywhere around 17 million, but I do think that we need to probably go out for it and see what happens and try our best, and the public knowing that we are very prudent on how we go about doing this. So.
So I agree with my counselors of your caution to the 17 million, but again, I'm going to reverse it before the 17 million, and let's go back to the existing authorization from the 9 million. To be transparent to the public and to my colleagues, I think you should all be aware of something going forward. And I agree with Tony, the debt service, the hardships of what's in front of this council that's being conveyed on this year's budget is taken into consideration. And I'm going to ask the Director of Public Works to come up in this conversation. So my colleagues do understand that there was an existing $1 million for the roads that was talked about for a year, being proactive and scheduled to be spent this year. And I don't know if I'm the only one who assumed that that project was going to take place, as we were conveying to the residents in many meetings with the Administrator and Director of Public Works, where the Director has a ready-to-shovel plan that can go out this week for those roads. Aside from that, the Administrator is correct. There are roads that are going to be done under the State Revolving Fund. That will take place. Also, there is some money that can piggyback to National Grid's continuation this summer in our town, where we could go curb to curb and work in tandem and utilize those funds. I just want to be transparent that the $1 million was not released, and that was conveyed by a treasurer who's not here tonight, so I don't want to speak on behalf of her. But I just want my colleagues to understand that that $1 million wasn't released, those funds aren't there, and if those funds aren't there, those roads aren't getting done this summer, so we won't be continuing with the plan that was suggested for a year of conversation going forward, and I think these residents need to understand that here tonight while we're talking about all this money associated with bonds and what it's associated with. Not that we can't utilize it next year, but I also want to put forward at least a consideration to this council that need be that you thought that $1 million was released, to actually have an opportunity of discussion with this council, administration, and the treasurer, and at least have that choice and options from our treasurer to say, well, if you do want to release money, maybe here's another option, and you don't have to use that $1 million to do those roads. Or my colleagues might, as you're mentioning, hold off this year. But I think it has to be conveyed to the public so the public doesn't hear one thing and then they're expecting something and it doesn't come to fruition this year. And that's what I want to convey here tonight. And if I'm missing anything, because we took time with our meetings with administration and the director for a 3 to 5 year plan, and that's why you're seeing $5 million for roads, because the whole project, as we specified last year, it can go up into the $20 to $30 million to do the whole town. So to keep the road program going, which in the state, obviously, we have those discussions of infrastructure, of the costs associated with it. We're being very modest going forward. So whether it's $1 million and we're being very cautious with the funds, I think we just have to be very transparent and convey to the public how these projects are progressing. That's all.
We haven't put anything on the ballot since for 4 years. So
That's
we've
correct.
been doing with and we still have some money left for that. So I mean, that gives people, I think, an idea of a time frame that, we do spend it over time. There's still some money left in those accounts, but it hasn't been since 2012.
Correct.
So.
And actually, thank you for bringing that point up, because there was a question about, is it appropriate in this year's budget? I think it's really important to say that we are in a difficult budget this year, and I'll leave the expletives for another day. But this doesn't, obviously, we need to do these things, and it makes no sense, and I'm not suggesting I'm married to the $17 million figure, please don't take me the wrong way, but we do need to do these things. And this is a voting year, meaning if we don't do it this year, then we have to wait 2 years to then get approval, to then do these things that need to get done. So if the voters, once we're clear on what we want and then convey that to the people of Bristol, if they believe in this and they say yes, then the next step is for us to spend the money appropriately. To that end, we had open space in 2012 of $2 million. We have a remaining $1.4 million. We had drainage in 2012. This was a bond that was passed by the voters for $3 million. Currently, we have all of that $3 million. Now, again, that's not real money. That's the authorization to go out and spend that money when we're ready to. My point is that there is restraint, and there's also, more importantly, appropriateness in spending these funds. If we don't approve something and put it in front of the voters to say this is what we believe is appropriate for a 5-year plan, as Councilman Stewart has already mentioned, then it's not a 5-year plan anymore. It's a 12-year plan or something crazy, because we're pushing these things out that have to get done. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. The question is, how much do we want to put to the voters in a referendum that is appropriate to do what we want to do and move forward? So if what I would suggest we do is, as opposed to looking at the large dollar figure, why don't we look at each piece and say, do we believe that $7 million is appropriate for drainage? And to keep in mind that we need to potentially match funds with the federal government. Now, we do have $3 million there already, but we also have to do other things. Tanyard Brook is not the only drainage issue. The whole town has drainage concerns, and some of it has drainage issues. So there's a lot of things that have to get done. So is $7 million appropriate? I guess we could start there, because that's the largest dollar figure on this page. Is there any reason to think that it is not? And if not, let's talk about what we think is right. Anyone?
How much is Tanyard 2?
How much is 10?
Well, we don't have any numbers yet, but projecting, when we met with Senator Reid, he asked that question too. He wanted a ballpark figure, and we talked about 7 to 9.
7 to 9 million.
So,
correct.
So I mean, if we
may
stayed
wanna
with
increase that
7,
number.
I mean, I'm not wedded to any particular number. I was just when I read the packet, because we just got this tonight, I was thinking about 4.5 to $5 million on the drainage piece. 7 million with plus the 3 would give us close to that, but that's not, as you say, the only project. And we're inundated with drainage problems around town. And so, I mean, I would say the minimum is probably 5 million to the 7 million. So I'm not wedded either to any one of these particular sets of numbers. You know, I see the value of going either way. I mean, we need to get it done. I mean, and I'm going to sound a little facetious here, and I don't really mean to be, but I mean, we don't want to get to the position that the state has found themselves in. You know, we don't want to be tolling Hope Street because we have, you know, road repairs and other things. I mean, and one of the things that makes Bristol, you know, special in the fact that we make it to many lists of being a desirable community and highly desirable, is because we do take care of these issues to the degree that we can. We don't constantly put off deferred maintenance. And so I think, you know, because it's an every 2-year election cycle, to get the bond authorization, you kind of have to think, because it's an election year, you have to think about being able to do it, but then you need to think out, I would say more like probably like the 4 or 5 years. I don't think this is going to be 3 years unless there's something really significant that comes up that's unanticipated at this point in time, that we would be going back out for another bond issue.
To your point, is whatever we decide now has got a 4-year consequence kind of thing?
At least, I would think. Yeah, I mean, that's the...
Or 5-year or 6.
Well, look, like we went out in 2006 for $15 million, and then 6 years later, in 2012, we went out for $9 million. It's 4 years later now, and we still have money left. So it's not like every election year, not like every election year we're out there with another bond. Right. So you can do it, and you can sort of nickel and dime it out, $1 million, $2 million, $5 million here and there, but you don't get anything done. And in some of these cases, you know, road repairs, you know, we'd have to look at the schedule as when's a good time to go out for road repairs, for example, because when things come down, you can do $1 million a year, let's just say hypothetically, $500,000, or you could maybe get a better deal price-wise because you're going to do more roads and go out for $2 million at one point, or something like that, you know, and that lowers the cost all the way around and addresses many of the problems that we have. So,
is that your suggestion? Because I'm still going to back up, because I asked the director to stand up. I know everyone wants to talk about the $17 million. I don't know if my comments got lost to my colleagues about, I'm going back to the other bond of 2012 of the $1 million that's existing, that's already an authorization for roads that is not released by this council. So it will not be spent this year, and I understand the consideration, and I agree with the administrator and my colleagues of the reservations due to the budget. I just want you to know, unless you have other conversation you would like to take place with the director and the administrator and the treasurer, that the roads that were ready to go out to bid this week will not be done this summer. Meaning, the roads for the state revolving fund will be done, and the curb-to-curb working with National Grid will be done. The proposed, as the conversations over this past year that the director and the administrator put a lot of work into, is not going to be done. So I'm saying that 3 times. So I'm crystal clear going back to the $1 million that's already authorized, aside from the $17 million, because I agree with the chairman. This is the time to do it. We're not spending it, but if it's accordingly and it's proper to have those amounts approved by the voters going forward for a multi-year plan, it's the responsibility and accountability of a council and administration and department heads to see fit on how to release those bonds going forward with projects on the best behalf of the taxpayers. So I don't know if you just, so we can go into the, you know, topic, let's finish up what I was referring to.
Well, repeat after Ed. The $1 million will not be spent, to make it crystal clear. That project would not be
done, but if you,
we're not doing that bond.
Councilwoman, if you heard me, out of consideration, if there's a dialogue with the reservations of the budget going forward, that everyone was under the impression that that $1 million was released, and is there other options, I believe that conversation should take part with the administrator, the director, and Julie, if you would like to see some roads done. Other than that, right now, that money is not released.
So you're saying potentially $250,000 or some other high-priority roads get done, but Julie's not here for us to have that conversation.
I might be able to shed a little bit of light on that to clarify it and reinforce what Councilman Stewart is putting out. First of all, we designed a project going forward and I moved them up because last year, as you know, the road projects went out later in the year, and we were chasing the end of the year trying to get it done. I wanted to get them out first thing in the spring to the best of our ability to take advantage of the full construction season. We have a project right now that is shovel-ready, ready to go, that is on hold. So we could advertise tomorrow if $1 million fell out of the sky. I built the bond referendum that you see before you tonight for the next 3 to 5 years based on utilizing $1 million plus or minus per year going forward so that we could try to stay ahead of this bow wave, if you will, of road infrastructure problems that we're faced with. So those two things are factoring in. Now, Councilman Stewart mentioned that there is cash available right now of about $230,000 more or less. What we're trying to do is utilize those dollars to partner with National Grid, who came in last year and did a lot of road work. They've got to come back, and they should be in town next month starting to repair all of these trenches. What we'd like to do is pony up with them, utilize their capability and some of our money to do a better job on some of these roads. So that's what we're holding back on that cash for, to work with them closer. Now, the other project for the $1 million that is not being released because Julie has some concerns and makes very legitimate concerns. At least the taxpayers understand that we are ready to go and it's online. Unfortunately, we have to take a knee on that one for this year. But I did build that bond referendum, and I've already built a 3-year plan with roads identified going forward. Now, we can adjust the roads that we do based on what happens in town or what utilities do work in town. But I built that looking at about $1 million a year going forward. So maybe at some point in the future, we put out 2 projects to do $2 million worth of work, as Councilwoman Perella mentioned, to take advantage of some volume and price reduction going forward. So there is that opportunity going forward to do that. But unfortunately, times are what they are. We're faced with some serious, budget constraints, and we have to do the best that we can. But it's important for the townspeople to know that this is on the radar, and this is very important to not only the council but the administration.
Thank you.
So what's the timeline around for us to make a decision on this?
10 minutes or so.
I understand it's like a home equity loan, and we only use what we need to have. And believe me, I'm for these projects, so don't get me wrong there. What gets me nervous is, and I just need a better understanding, is that we're going to go up another 77 cents, it looks like, to $14.80, plus we're taking $1 million out of our surplus to cover. And as a town, I want us to live in our truth, because we're spending money again from our savings, and we have to come up with that 2.8 million for the schools for next year. And I'm just cautious about us having to make sure we have that revenue in place, and so we can take advantage of these bond referendums as well and be able to do some of these projects. So I'm just cautious as far as the big overall picture, of our financial plan. Are we going to be able to do some of these projects due to the fact that we have to come up with extra money next year?
So the answer is that it doesn't affect our budget to approve or not approve this. It adds zero to it. The only time it adds money is when the 5 people that are sitting here say it's fine, with recommendations from the rest of the people that are sitting out here. So that's where it happens. So it cost us nothing. This is truly the time to do it. And let me be clear one more time. Again, the marriage is not with this dollar figure per se. I don't necessarily have opposition to it either. But it cost us nothing. There is no commitment. Besides, we are committed to, when we want the money, it is there to use. When we feel is it appropriate to use it, when the project is sound, whether it's a 50-50 match or a 20% match to do, there's so many things that are out there, and as we all know.
And it's looking ahead 3 to 5.
Exactly. Right. And if we don't do this now, and again, it's not a dollar figure per se, but it is absolutely appropriate for us to put it out to the people of Bristol. It's financially responsible for us to do that. Right. And what I would suggest we do here is, I brought up the drainage. I didn't hear any opposition to that number. Maybe if there's a particular number here that you are in opposition to, and a suggested appropriate adjustment to it, and we can talk about that dollar figure. Again, this is not committing to these dollars. This gives us the opportunity to use them when we feel it is appropriate.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just add something, because I think you and I were on both on the same email chain today with
Yes.
bond counsel. The problem the council has at this particular moment, okay, is that the Rhode Island legislature is getting close to adjournment, okay? And one of the things that you have to do as part of this process is you have to bring a bill to the legislature to get the legislature to say, yeah, it's okay to do this, okay? And if the legislature adjourns before you do that, then they've made the decision for you. What I suggest that you might want to do is to agree in principle to take it to the legislative level, and then even if you decide that in November you don't want it on the ballot, you just tell me don't do it. Because that way, at that point, you're driving the bus. You know, otherwise, if it's not approved, then you won't have the option to decide in October, hey, you know what, maybe it was really a good idea to do this, and that won't be an option for you.
Here's one of the things that, I know what everybody's, I mean, I have the same concerns I think everyone else does too, but I think we can't stop, because this is authorization, so it doesn't even, won't even know the answer to this until November. And a lot of this is construction related, so that's not even going to go into, any of it won't even be implemented at the very earliest, probably till February, March. I mean, a lot of this is, on our mind, is being driven by the lawsuit. Let's be honest about it. If we win, that's one scenario. If we lose, and we have to then probably, whatever is authorized, we're not going to be able to do for many, 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 many years.
Correct.
So,
Throw a few more manys in there.
many, 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 many. Well, we can't let everything fall apart, but, you know. So, I mean, but we can't stop. You know, we have to move forward because
Correct.
of the unknowns.
Right.
And so we have to just do what we would do that's in the town's best interest, because none of this is spending any money at this point. And then reassess that when we go forward with any of these projects. So, I mean, the only question I have, Tony, could you just remind me how much the marina would cost that we've talked about? I just don't remember the marina project. Approximately.
The marina?
Yeah.
Well, Greg is not here, but the number that him and I talked about is definitely a little bit over 2.
Okay.
Is that 2,000?
No. Yeah. Yeah.
2,000.
Yes.
No.
2 million.
Over
Yeah.
2.
My question,
It would be unfair for me to throw any other numbers out there because I really don't have enough
Well,
to
I
support
understand that none
that,
of
so
this
it
is-
would be unfair.
Right.
You know,
None of it is
but
built, none of it
that's
is
correct.
like, you know, engineered and so forth and so on. I just wanted to know, I just wanted to make sure that if we go forward with the marina in this list, that it's not just a drop in the bucket, that if we're going to do it, we're going to do something and have enough money to do
Everything that's necessary.
most
Not
of it, or
most of it,
yeah,
right.
you know, I mean,
I got your point.
you know, just not, it's 10 million and we're putting 2 towards it, you know.
as the chairman stated, you know, this is just an amount that has to go out to be approved. The clerk said, you know, we're on a timetable. If there was a question amongst my colleagues of the amounts, I think my only questions would be, one, to Diane of Open Space, do you feel 2 million, or can we lower that? And it's the same with public buildings. But, you know, we had meetings of capital projects, things in, you know, the radar for the future. So I'm comfortable with the 17 million, but if my colleagues were to question to go 16 million, 15, I think that would jeopardize the access of what your recommendations, you didn't just come up with a number. Your recommendations were profound by, this is what we need. So that's why I'm comfortable with the 17 million. So I make a motion that this council, I'm going to have to craft it.
I think what you would do is you would ask the bond counsel to draft the necessary documents so that you can consider them to go forward with a request for a $17 million bond.
And that would go automatically to the legislature once upon this approval?
I think you're going to see the actual document.
We'll come back to you
It's gonna
probably,
come-
hopefully by May 4th, and at that point, you'd vote to get
Yeah,
it
I
to
think what we did talk about with the bond council was the possibility of having it at one of your upcoming
we should,
special
yeah.
meetings.
Yeah, we should need to do that, yeah.
October.
Oh, yeah.
April.
Not
April
October.
26th.
Yeah.
We actually have a meeting next week. We have a workshop, if my
I would
memory's
say
correct,
we
next
would need
week,
to if you're
too.
trying to get it to the legislature.
Well, we have one tomorrow.
Yes, we do. Oh, I didn't think it would be that fast, but
Yeah, no, but we can't do it tomorrow. But I'm thinking, from what I gave her and her work that she has to do, probably at the time that the budget would be adopted, which is the 25th?
26th.
27th?
27th.
I don't know, yeah, 25th, 26th, 27th, yeah,
Well,
27th.
my own opinion is that it's fine to go ahead and produce the document, but I don't want to vote on 17 million tonight. I want to fill in the number later on, after we give it due consideration.
Well, maybe we can, the advantage I see to having a more complete document, I think the solicitor will support me in this, is that the council can certainly trim that number
when it comes back.
before it comes back. But this, rather than having, there may be like certain triggers that, I'm not an expert on bond language, okay? But I think she should look at that number as maybe that's the outside number, okay? And we can explain that to her. We can even put that in the motion as the outside number, with the understanding that the council will adjust it when the time comes.
Well, I think that's the way it has to be done at this point, because not only should we adjust it, we should probably adjust the components that add up to a total.
And for the sake of transparency, to be honest, I think I would rather publish that you're going to be considering a $17 million bond than just one with a blank.
Right.
Because somebody may say, I have no objection to 1 million, but I really have a big problem with 17, so they may not show up to talk to you about that. Not that we have that many people that want to, but.
So with that, we have a motion. Is there a second so we can? Thank you. So now the rest of that discussion, and Pete, I see you, just one moment. So was there any other council discussion before I recognize Pete?
Well, I just wanted to support my motion to the clerk's verbiage on that whole motion, which he's documented, part of the record. And also, we're talking about, part of that motion is pretty much not to exceed 17 million, but can be modified under 17 million, need be by the request by us with the amounts that are specified under the agenda topics, and by the advice of the bond council coming back to this council.
I'm more comfortable with that.
So that was that amended motion, and Halsey, is that still a second from you, sir?
Well, I'd like to have this motion reread.
I'm sorry, I
Sure
apologize. That
it
was
is.
Mary's second. My apologies. Mary, do you second that amended motion?
Yes.
Okay. Now we can go to that discussion.
Okay.
And Pete, I recognize you. Go ahead.
I have a question and a couple of comments. First question. The Hopeworth and Roosevelt sections have been torn up pretty badly by Bristol County Water Authority.
Yeah.
So if and when the $2 million in the bond for road repairs is acted upon, the question is Bristol County Water Authority responsible for fixing the sloppy work they've done, carving up Bristol's roads down in the Hopeworth, Roosevelt, and perhaps Metacom Avenue section as well?
Before you respond to that, that is off topic.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I'd love to hear the answer to that, but that is not this agenda item, and I actually concur with everything you just said, but again, that is not this specific agenda item.
I thought it sounded pretty.
It is not, because we're talking about how much money we're going to bond out and if we think it is appropriate to put it to the people of Bristol. So that is, although
So there's another time for that question to be asked.
Sure, yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir.
And my only comments were, which may be off topic either, but I think Halsey raised the point that, when you go out for a bond issue and the people vote in favor of a $2 million, a $6 million, a $10 million bond not to exceed, it doesn't necessarily mean you must spend the $2 million, $6 million.
We all agree with that.
Right.
And that point has been made multiple times this
Every
evening.
time I drive down Metacom and I look out and I see the fire station, my wife says, don't look at it, because my blood pressure goes up. And the only other point I'll make is...
I feel like you're going off topic here, Pete.
I am, but this is important to me.
Yeah,
Mary,
but
you mentioned
if
the
it's,
fact-
wait, stop. Is it on topic to what we're talking about? Then we need to stop. So,
But it is germane to what Mary's concern was about tolling.
okay. Okay. Thank you, sir.
I knew that was coming.
All right, so
I shouldn't have said that then, with you.
we have a motion and a second, and it was a large motion, and I'm not going to
I
repeat
would
it.
ask you to reread the motion.
Well, can I give you at least the flavor of it?
You betcha you can. Go
Okay,
ahead.
Because it's going to need a little bit of
Tweaking?
a little tweaking to make me out, because if you even try, can you read what that says?
All I know, it's a request to the bond
Yeah,
council.
Basically, that we're going to authorize the bond council to prepare the necessary documents for a bond to be placed on the November ballot, okay, with the consideration of an amount not to exceed $17 million, with the understanding that before the council would be to approve same, it can modify the figures as it sees fit.
And there was a second. So, that is the motion. There is a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay.
I'd love to see that motion when that's done. So,
Yeah, well,
thank you.
it'll be a work of art.
Yes, it
I
will.
can guarantee you that.
Just spectacular.
Okay, all right, the next item is the,
What channel are we on?
this is from Councilman Sweeney's prerogative on March 30th, requesting a status report on the former Azevedo property.
Hey, hi Diane. I just wanted to get an update on the Esvitos property. We had that, basically a feasibility study about what we could do with the buildings, and we talked about maybe leveling one or not, or repairing both, but I just haven't heard, where are we now?
Every time any of us drive by that, we're ashamed of it.
Well, hopefully it won't be that way for long. Myself and the town administrator met when we did our capital budget meeting. Those buildings were sort of on the list of what do we do. There was a decision made by the administrator that we should try to see if there was anyone out there who would want to take them off of our hands and restore them. And we felt that we owed it to them to at least see who was out there who might want to do that for us. We understand that there's no appetite for the town to spend any money at all restoring them, but we felt that there might be somebody out there who would do that. So I drafted an RFP. The solicitor has looked at it. Actually, Ed and Jessica, I have to give a shout out to them because they helped with it also while I was away. And that's right. And the clerk did it for us, too.
Yeah, thank you,
There
Lou.
was a brilliant language that the clerk put in. I must duly note that brilliant language from the clerk.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Lou.
brilliant.
I
So
used the
modest, my goodness.
I have to confess, I used the word brilliant, and I told her that she should describe it that way.
It was brilliant. So the RFP was drafted, reviewed, the solicitor looked at it, I reviewed it with Tony again, and it is to be advertised in tomorrow's Phoenix.
Oh.
We're asking for interest in a long-term lease. And a long-term lease is based on the solicitor's recommendation and based on some things that I have since learned, I think the best option for us. It's basically a sale, if you will, but you still get to own it, and you can remonetize that asset. So when the long-term lease is over, you get to negotiate another term. So we're going to see what comes in. We're going to see what comes back with that, and hopefully we'll get some responses.
And would they be together, both properties together,
Yes.
or could they split it?
We advertised it as for both buildings.
Well, Diane, I don't agree with that at all. We went to the trouble in high expense, although we got a good deal, Tony and I, to acquire that property. And the most valuable element of that purchase is not those buildings, it's the waterfront. And in time, even though we don't yet have a specific plan, those waterfront areas can be very beneficial to the future planning of the harbor as an element of it. So what I would propose, instead of some complicated thing that would tie us up or sell what we bought, I think we should tear down one of those buildings and open up the property to get in there easily, and then fix up the other one.
So for clarity, because I did not explain this part of the RFP, is this would be for the buildings, and whatever land around the buildings the town negotiates to include with them, the intent is clear in the RFP that it is the town's intention to own the waterfront,
Well, I
the riparian
understand.
rights, the boardwalk, and all of the open space.
I understand that, but in
behind
order
the
for that
building.
waterfront to be useful, you've got to be able to get in there better than now. I walk in there, but I wouldn't want to drive my car in there. I think we should tear down one of the buildings and then in some way fix up the other one. Maybe we can get somebody to have a long-term lease, but they are be required to paint it or something and use it. But I don't believe that after going to all this trouble for the town to acquire that property, which, by the way, gives us very continuous ownership, except for one or two houses. We own State Street, Azevedo, the fire station, Rockwell Park, the Fireman's Memorial, and I forgot, of course, Church Street Dock, and all the way to the Marine Center. And so they're all useful, except we can't get into the Azevedo property. So I would prefer a different plan where you tear down one of the buildings, make a nice access, and find some clever way to fix the other one without a permanent sale of it. Just another idea.
I mean, what would be nice down there, I think, we don't want to spend the money on it, but, and I understand the proximity to the water, that something bad can happen, in a storm. Because their size is small, but if you're looking for like a small museum, like you're talking about the artifacts or the 4th of July committee, things like that. I mean, there may be some public use, and maybe in this RFP process, I don't know if you've included that, if somebody took them on and fixed them up, then we retain the first floor of one of them for our own purposes, and that would bring people downtown into that area. I mean, what do you guys view as a long-term lease? Is it like
Well, first of all, in the
10,
first,
20 years, or is it
I
not
just want to go
100
back to
years?
your first point, because the RFP is, again, very clear that the public use is really a high priority for the town. And nonprofits, anybody like that who might be interested can certainly put in an RFP. And I think we need to do this and see what responses we get in order to look at what a different future might be for those buildings. But the RFP says up to 99 years. The solicitor says that the commercial mortgage is, I believe, a 20-year minimum, and I think it can go up to a 35-year minimum. So you're looking at, to be able to finance it's basically a purchase for all intents and purposes, but it's a lease. I think it's sort of a win-win, because you get to get the cash revenue as if you're selling it, but you still own it for a future negotiation and sale.
I wouldn't want to see 99 years, but all this could be up when we may get nothing in, like in the Wally School project. But
right.
Is there any interesting collaboration, especially with some of the job training pieces out there, like between the School of Architecture, some of the construction management, some of the other projects out there, to put a group together that, becomes like a student-driven project to restore those buildings?
We haven't gone that route yet, and I think, again, with the council not in support of spending any town funds on the restoration, I think we're looking at this RFP to see what interest we can get from somebody who's got the revenue to do the renovations with good financing and isn't going to be nickel and diming it and looking for grants from us and so forth. The RFP is out. It's been sent to the newspaper. It'll be advertised next week. We're asking for the respondents to come in by the May 25th meeting of the council. So we haven't given a whole lot of time, but I would just like to see, and I think that the town administrator and all had encouraged me to try to do this, to see what interest we get from somebody who has the capacity to restore the buildings. And again, to everyone's items that they've brought up tonight, this will be, if we get, hopefully we'll get more than one, hopefully we'll get one, or more than one preferred. And this will be a negotiation. The town administrator and all, we'll have to see what the best fit is. This is similar to what we did with the rescue station. We went out twice on that, and then we ended up negotiating a very good deal for the town. So I think that this is really, at this point, to see what interest there is. Obviously, there'll be a whole lot of dialogue once we see what comes in.
But Diane, I think it's different from the fire station, the rescue station. The rescue station was a property that we modified our intentions by moving the rescue trucks to the new fire station. We had no reason to hold that. The difference is we spent money and we built in a plan to acquire this property for use. And I don't believe in tying up, whether it's 1 year, 20 years, or 100 years, the shabby buildings, which are really not a very big amount of money one way or the other, to impede the intended use of the property itself. I don't think it's a good plan. If it was going to bring the town millions of dollars, sure. But for a small deal that, in effect, would seriously hamper the potential use of the property, I don't think it's a good deal to do that at all.
Well, I think it's a little premature because we don't have a deal on the table. I think the idea is to see what is out there. I also think that the historic preservation, which was driving a lot of this, I think they're going to want to see evidence that we tried to find another use. We tried to put it out to somebody else who would restore them and show them that we made a good faith effort. Maybe this effort will result in some fabulous proposal that will work perfectly with our goals and our intents and get some revenue back to the town to put into the restoration of the rest of the property. But I really feel strongly that we need to go keep down this path, see what happens. You always have the prerogative to reject the bids. Right. You don't have to accept any of the offers. Maybe you'll get something interesting. Maybe you won't, get much. It's hard to speculate, but I really think that we need to take the step.
You really need a very brilliant solution to get my vote.
Well, can I just suggest and kind of put it into clarity? First off, one of the options was specified of knocking one of the buildings down. I was under the understanding through the State Historic Preservation, that's not an option. And we were presented that because of that option, we had to think of other viable solutions, which we had a presentation and a study, as Councilman Sweeney stated, presented to this council. Now, the three options, or was there two, that was presented by the firm that presented of what we can do as a council on behalf of the residents for the town use. I think on every presentation they gave us, this council said, what? Meaning sticker shock. So that's what's causing us to come up with creative alternatives such as this because of what we're presented with. Because I agree with Councilman Hevershoff that if we went back and turned the clock back, that we could knock them down to open up more landscapes of opportunity for that property. That's one thing, but I think that wasn't an option, so we proceeded to see what our options were. We got sticker shocked by how much would be invested in that. So to kind of like go through every alternative, this is the next step going forward. So.
But Eddie, I'd just like to make one further remark, if I might. That report was, to my way of thinking, not hugely strong in the preservation of the buildings. And they did, if you read it carefully, say that they felt there was some synergy between the two, and if you're going to save them both. But they did not absolutely say you had to save both, if you read that report carefully. So I really believe we have a lot of options open, and with all respect for what you're doing, I just don't think this deal you propose is a good one for the town.
If that is true what the councilman's stating as another alternative, but like you said, it doesn't hurt to see what is coming back, because I understand Councilman Hevershoff's reservations of getting into a lease agreement and attached to the excess land on the waterfront. It could be, kind of mixed up once we have those agreements. But the other option down the line, if he is correct on, kind of persuading the historic preservation of just let us take one down and open up a window of opportunity to kind of be different than what was presented by the firm. That's another option also. So thank you.
So Diane, I just want to know what is the timeline for, so we're going to go out and maybe see if we can get...
So the RFP will be in tomorrow's newspaper, and we are proposing to really shake the trees. I mean, we've gotten a lot of ideas of how we can push this out to see what interest there is from other groups, historic preservation type folks. There will be a couple of scheduled tours for respondents, and then of course we'll give them tours if they want to come at other times. The RFP will be due on May 25th,
Okay.
which is one of your council days. So the expectation is that we'll get some proposals, we'll present them to you and see what happens.
Well, I mean, we may want to have a meeting where we hear from, if there's
Correct.
multiple options
Correct.
ourselves, right?
Correct. And that's all in there. The council will have to have a public hearing. I mean, if it ends up evolving into something that's,
Because right now, we just raised our hand and said,
Correct.
give us some ideas.
Correct.
There is 0 ideas on the table right
Correct.
now. We are in no danger of making it any better as it sits right
Correct.
now.
Correct.
I, for one, will not spend dime one on those less than quality homes at this point. They are, as my analogy I've given many times, this is not an old statue that we found that has the arm missing. This is the arm, and we don't know where the statue is. So this is horrible, in my opinion. And Diane, you can see she's being very kind because we thoroughly disagree on this, and that's okay.
The statue's in the other house.
But at the moment, it doesn't matter. We are looking for ideas.
Correct.
It cost us the efforts that you've given so far
Right.
from the clerk, as he pointed out earlier,
Yes.
and others, and also brilliant ideas, and the advertising cost.
Right.
Let's see what comes back. The worst thing that happens is absolutely nothing happens,
Right.
and then we need to figure out what's next.
Right.
And I am not committing to anything because there's nothing to commit to.
Exactly. It's just to shake the trees, really. But I would hope that we can, and with your help, push it out to people who might be interested in working with us. And it would have to be a partnership. I mean, that's the other beauty of the long-term lease, is it does become a public-private partnership to some extent, because you're not selling it, you're negotiating on a partnership.
Right, and that's my biggest fear. I just don't want to. I don't want to see that dilapidated property just sit and sit. For
Agreed.
another year, and
I agree.
So
I agree,
council,
and we all have had different speculative thoughts, and so let's put it out and see what.
We'll see what happens. Right.
So,
See if we get
Councilman, Vice Chair Sweeney, would you be okay with continuing this to the 25th? It would seem
That'd be
appropriate
great.
since we'll have the bids back at that point in time.
Yep, I make a motion to continue this to the 25th council meeting.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay, the next item is correspondence from Michael Borges, the General Chairman of the Firemen's Memorial and Welfare Committee, asking council consideration for support of the 61st Annual Fundraiser and Program Book.
How many trumpets did we do last year?
You did as many as they allow.
5.
Is there a motion for the 5 trumpets that we've done?
6 trumpets.
So moved. Oh, there's 5, full page.
It was a full page, right?
Yeah, 5 trumpets.
Yeah, we
Second.
can do 5.
So we have a motion and a second for a total of 5 trumpets. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. It's a great event. I'm joking around, but this is wonderful, and we are
It's $100.
Yeah, it's $100, and we're happy to support this every year because it's a wonderful cause.
And that would come from the council contingency?
Sir, yes, sir.
That is.
Okay. And the next item is from the administrator regarding the 2016 Community Development Block Grant application. You have correspondence provided by the program manager.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Jessica
Good evening.
Plummer, previously here as Economic Development Coordinator, now here as CDBG Program Manager. Different hats here. so.
You know, in the future, you can sit right next to Diane and get the heat that she just got for a little bit.
I wanted to observe tonight.
Okay.
It's been fun.
Go ahead, please.
So tonight, I would just like to present to you the proposed 2016 program year CDBG application that is due May 13th to the Office of Housing and Community Development. I'm here on behalf of the CDBG Review Committee that met on, I thought I had the date here, it was March
31.
March 31st, there we go. Okay, right there, all right. And so I'm here just to present the priorities and give a brief description of the projects going forward. So priority 1, we have the East Bay Coalition for the homeless doing their fair housing services for homeless prevention and education and transitional housing. They serve about 25 Bristol residents and they had, I think, 5 families within their transitional housing program last year who were then transferred to permanent housing. They're asking for $20,000 for their services and operation costs. Priority 2 is Looking Upwards Group Home Rehabilitation. Looking Upwards owns a couple of properties here in Bristol that are available for low-income adults with developmental disabilities. They are asking for $27,000 to install central air conditioning units. Right now they have window units that cause some behavioral issues with the tenants in there, and a centralized unit will not only help with some of the behavioral issues that they have, but it will also lower the utility costs associated with running the homes. Priority 3 is the Town of Bristol sidewalk repair. In the memo that you have, it says that Bayview Avenue or other areas within the low to moderate income census tracts is determined by an assessment to be completed by the Department of Community Development and Public Works. I've got a better idea of where those will be, and if you would like, I can give you a map that Ed Tanner printed off specifying the areas.
Right. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No color?
Well, Julie won't let us use the color. Yeah.
The budget's not that tough, I'm sorry. We can afford a color copy. Okay.
Just in a quick description here. So the sidewalks in the neighborhood that's bounded on the east by High Street, the west by Magnolia Street, the south by Franklin Street, and to the north by Bayview Avenue. The sidewalks to be repaired include Roma Street from Wood Street to Gray Street on both sides, resetting the existing granite curbing and installing new concrete sidewalks. Wilson Street from Franklin Street to Roma on the west side with new concrete curbing and sidewalks, and the St. Elizabeth Street from Wood to Wilson on both sides, repairing existing concrete sidewalks as needed.
So sort of like that block with the exception of Wood Street, probably, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's a total of 219,000, is it?
The total application,
Yeah.
we're looking at $250,000.
Well, if you added these numbers, you get 219. Where's the rest? Oh, the rest is the service. I see, yeah. Okay. Well, now, in previous years, Jerry also had a request for an over the cap. Is that something we're going to do again?
That is not something we did this year because of the applications that we got from the subrecipients. The state is transitioning some of the previous projects. They're doing a set-aside now for economic development specifically, and that's where some of the bigger projects have come in. And what they're doing now, instead of requiring that those be applied for in the annual application process, there is a rolling application. So anytime a project is ready to go, they can submit an application to us. We will come back to the council for approval, and then we can send that to the state at any time during the year.
So you're saying there is not the previous arrangement of over the cap?
Not that I'm aware of this year, no.
Well, I'd also like to comment on priority 3. I'm delighted to see that on this view, you said concrete, because you may know or may not know that about 4 years ago, we built a bunch of horrible asphalt sidewalks that are nothing like level, and the puddles are all over them, and I hope, Kevin, you agree with me that asphalt sidewalks are bad. Okay, great. You might even want to put the word concrete in the request, but at least to understand that's good.
Yeah, I completely agree, Councilman. You get long-term use out of those sidewalks, and they last a lot longer.
Yeah, they do.
More importantly, they look a lot better.
Yeah.
Better to do less and do it right than to do a lot and do it poorly.
So, Jessica, if you could continue with your priorities, go ahead.
Okay. So the next priority, priority 4, is the Bristol Senior Center exterior painting. They've worked with the 1772 Foundation and a couple of other organizations to get a match to help with painting the entire exterior of the Bristol Senior Center, and also replacing the shutters on the windows that will be included as match that's actually in process right now, I believe. So they're asking for $60,000 from the CDBG application for that. Cornerstone Adult Services, which is monitored by the town of West Warwick. This is a regional activity, so they request monies from other towns that the town applies for within their cap, but then the money will go to that town for that specific organization, and in this case, it's West Warwick for Cornerstone Adult Services, in the amount of $5,000.
Jessica, Cornerstone, in our budget, we give them money to
In human services.
Right? In human services. Yeah. So okay. So all total, they get us about $6,000 for it.
And the final priority is the Town of Bristol Home Repair Program. That shows up as a 0 line item. That is also a set-aside application, where as we get individual homeowners who apply to the town and qualify based on income, we check, make sure that they qualify, make sure that their projects qualify, and then we can send that to the state, who then approves the projects, and then the money comes out of the state's set-aside for that. It's on here so that we can do what's called a tiered review with that, where we have the overall review of simply the home repair program. And then as those applications come in, they're smaller, so we just do individual site reviews and then send those to the state.
Jessica, may I say that I've had 4 of these presented while I've been on the council, and this was the clearest, cleanest, most straightforward one that we've gotten. So thank you.
Thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Job well done.
That's so true.
Yes. My question, I don't want you to take it personal, but you are in the room, so I have to say it pertains to you, but my question is it's going to be directed to Julie, but I'm going to defer to the administrator to get an answer, because during budget deliberations pertaining to community development and line items, the administration fee of the $31,800, I would like for you to come up with an answer to provide to the council on how that line item in monies gets presented in the budget for line items pertaining to the EDC coordinator. Thank you.
I just had a quick question, and that is on the group home. I don't have a problem with this being in here. I'm just curious, do the other group homes in town know that they can apply to this? I'm thinking back at one point that, not in CDBG, but in our council budget, we were giving money to different museums for sort of capital projects. But it wasn't like we opened it up to all of them and said, you might need a roof this year, somebody else might need it next year, whatever. Do others, do you believe, know that they could come forward for something like this and make their case?
I think they do. We are required by state law and federal law to publicize that the application is open, and I think we also put it out to organizations that generally come yearly and ask for money. So we put it out to them specifically too, and just let them know that the application is there. It's up to them to come to us and apply for the funds. There are specific requirements for each project. You have to meet specific national objectives, low to moderate income, area benefit, which is the low to moderate income neighborhood. So you have individuals or you have an area, or job creation. Those are the main objectives that you have to meet, and you have to prove that you meet those objectives as a result of the project. So I don't know if maybe that influences the decision for some of the organizations to apply for CDBG funds specifically.
And do you guys anticipate that there'll be another application going in for Bristol Industrial Park?
We expect that probably around the summer, the industrial park will be ready to move forward on some of their other improvements with the roofs and the fire suppression. Right now, we're working with them to spend down the 2014 funds that they still have. They're required to have those spent down before we apply for another round. And we're also interested in working with perhaps some of the manufacturers and other job creators within Bristol, exploring infrastructure upgrades, like connecting to the water authority for sprinkler updates and that kind of thing. So we're kind of hoping in the summer to have a bigger economic development set aside.
Well, beyond just the park, but to other manufacturers, that would be great, yeah.
Do we utilize the website to share this information?
Yes,
And
we
we
do.
point the people, whoever might be interested that way. Excellent. Tony, you had a point you wanted to make?
Yes, just very quick. And the group homes, them being aware, yes, they are. They've actually have benefited from generators because there was an issue, if you recall. We had a winter there. We had a blackout, and there was an issue where some of the residents were taken to the high school, and they did not feel very comfortable there. And at that point, they were made aware of the program. So they are very much aware of the CDBG, and they did apply. I believe 3 of them actually benefit from 3 generators, so they are very much aware of it.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the CDBG application for 2016.
I'll second. Is this being forwarded to the Director of Community Development and the Administrator on the acceptance of the recommendations presented in this application to go forward?
Yes, you're referring it to the town administrator to make the annual application.
Okay.
Yeah, so moved.
Is there a second? That's a second?
Second?
Yes.
Whatever, yeah.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you.
And also, you want to adopt that resolution too, the fair housing resolution, which was...
I heard
Sorry,
that.
that's-
Do you need a separate motion on that?
Yeah, please.
I make a motion to approve the fair housing CDBG resolution. Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is from the town administrator regarding a status report on Solarize Rhode Island.
This project, actually, it's very important to our residents and business alike, but the person really who took the initiative on this and weekend warrior to get the application in and make sure that we would be considered, that Bristol would be considered for the program, was Diane, Ed Tanner, and Jess, and I believe Richard helped out in some way. But Diane took the initiative, and I know she worked pretty hard throughout this. And she can actually give us a better status of the entire report, but as you can see there, they were at the Health Expo registering residents that were interested, and we have what's called a 3-tier. Tier 1 is, I believe, up to 10 residents, Tier 2 goes up to a certain number, and then Tier 3. So we're trying to see if we can reach Tier 3 if possible, but I'll let Diane fill us in a little bit more on this.
Sure. I don't know how familiar you are with this program, but this is a program through the Office of Energy Resources with the state, and we applied, as Tony mentioned. We were selected with 2 other communities. The program works in a way where we work with the state to pick a vendor. That particular vendor, solar vendor, then works with us for all sorts of marketing and community outreach. And I did tap into someone who has had experience with the solar panels at the school, Pat McCarthy, and he has been included in our application as an ambassador. The state's looking for ways to just basically spread the word for this program, and so people can sign up on the website solarizeri.com, click the Bristol link, and a representative from the firm that we selected will come out and visit their house, determine if they're eligible for solar panels, if they have the right pitch and the right solar exposure. As Tony mentioned, the program is with a tiered pricing, so the more people who sign up, the lower the price goes for the people who do sign up. There's also state incentives. There's the Renewable Energy Fund grant, and there's a Renewable Energy Growth feed-in tariff, which people can be eligible to receive as well. And so it's a program that ends on June 26th. So the idea is that we're going to try to sign up as many people as quickly as we can to take advantage of this pricing. And then the vendor will come to the town, get the permits, and then he'll work on scheduling the installation. We have, as Tony mentioned, we have had the vendor at the health fair. There were about 500 people who went through. We're looking at a community kickoff. We're still trying to pin down that date. We've been between scheduling with all the people involved in the venue. It's been a moving target, so I can't give you that date yet, but I will as soon as we announce it. And we're hoping that maybe we can do something at the school with Pat's help to get the word out. So we will have some banners, maybe more than 3, or maybe 3.
Don't be like that.
Maybe 3.
Don't be like that.
Maybe 3.
You can stop right now, you know.
No, we'll be having banners and additional promotional materials for folks. So I just want to say, spread the word to anybody.
Which website do we go to?
It's residential and businesses.
So what's the website again?
The website is www.solarizeri.com. SOLARIZERI.com. And the vendor we selected is Soul Power, and they will be the ones who will come out and look at your property.
Diane, have you addressed this as far as the Historic District is concerned?
I have. I've spoken to the Historic District staff person, and my understanding is that as long as the solar panels are sited appropriately on the roof, it is not a problem. I've also spoken to the vendor, who was the vendor selected for this program in South Kingstown, and he's very well versed on the ins and outs of how to do it in historic districts. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to help as many people in the district as we can.
So we're all eligible to participate in this?
Yes, everybody's eligible. Yes, and you can spread the word to your neighbors. I mean, that's what's kind of neat about this. If you get other people to sign up, then there are incentives that, come to you, and then you keep spreading the word and getting more people.
So for lack of a better explanation, so many times I've gone into, a big box store in Massachusetts, and there's been somebody there promoting, I think this, and it's interesting, but then when they find out I'm in Rhode Island, they say, can't do this because you're not, is it basically that's the program
Yes,
that you get credits back, whatever?
Yes. So they did it in Massachusetts.
Right.
And then Rhode Island modeled theirs after Massachusetts. So it's growing. And there's also, it's kind of interesting because not everybody is eligible not everybody's property works out for the solar installation. So the vendor will work with you to maybe help you with direct you to other incentives or bring you on in some other capacity through, the marketing program so that you can still be, in a way, part of helping spread the solar, but, not in the same way as getting solar panels on your house.
Mm-hmm.
Diane, I signed up because I went to the fair, so I'm signed up, and they already sent me an email, and they're ready to talk about an estimate and everything. And I was just curious because I'm in the historical district, so I don't know if I'm even eligible at all to put anything up.
Well, it depends on how the sun hits your property, and what they will do, what the vendor told me, which is in line with what the HDC will be looking for, is that they will want to put them on the back side of the house or the side that's not, visible from the street. So
yeah.
Hopefully that would be a southern exposure for you. So
yeah,
hopefully that would work.
I'm going to give him a call. He said he'd talk over the phone or meet in person.
Good,
so, very nice.
good. And it was a very interesting process. It was sort of like speed dating. The state put out an RFP for the vendors. We had 3 or 4 vendors who applied to work in Bristol, and we went up to the state and we interviewed them all, like very quick, half an hour interview, and I think you'll be pleased with the vendor that we chose.
Great.
They seem like a very good firm.
I'll forward this email out to my colleagues. That way if they want to participate.
That was my question. So each community on that process you just explained to all the vendors, so other communities have different vendors that they picked?
They do.
Now, the people of Bristol, though, if they want an opportunity to capitalize on this program, they have to be exclusive to the vendor that we chose and not have the option to use another vendor.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. They encouraged us to each pick an individual vendor, primarily because of the capacity, because they want to be able to make sure that they've got enough manpower to, accommodate all the people who sign up. And they had a regional program on Aquidneck Island, and I'm not quite sure of the details, but I heard that they had a little bit of an issue with multiple vendors. People were hopping around and talking to one vendor and then talking to another vendor, and it was a little confusing. So they've encouraged us to each have our own, which is fine with us.
Well, being a free commercial, that's one less question homeowners that are paying attention will ask if they, so.
Right, right.
Pat, did you want to add something?
Yeah, if I might. Pat McCarthy, 4 Maple Shade Court. I'd like to just publicly thank Diane, Walter, and Tony for picking me to be the ambassador, public ambassador for this program. I really appreciate it. And what I'd like to just talk about real briefly is the project at the Our Lady of Mount Carmel School. That is a CNI project for photovoltaic solar panels. And that is 160 panels on a commercial scale. That project is around 45 kW. An average home is between 5 and 6. So it's much, much smaller, about a ninth of the size, if you will. What's interesting is I just received the energy bill, the electricity bill for Mount Carmel School. And from the February and March bill, which we just received, with solar panels, compared to the exact same time frame a year ago. And I don't know the number of sunny days or cloudy days or inclement weather days, so it is what it is. But the electric bill was 83% less.
Wow.
And we're not even into the later spring, summer, and fall high production time for a solar panel project because the days are long.
Well, during those times, will you be selling power back to the grid?
Well, Councilman Herreshoff, that's an interesting question because that's what we were thinking. And the way it works is with grant money, you are not allowed to make profits. So you will produce up to your need, and that'd be the end of it. It's a concept known as distributive generation, where the school is a distributive generator of power. We consume it. When we don't need to consume it, like in the summer, we sell it back to the grid, but it's only up to the point where it's net to zero. You will not be making money.
So the resident should come with an electrical cord to use the excess.
Bring your own tool.
Hey,
You and I
let's
must
talk
think
a little bit about that.
You and I must think alike, because I mentioned to Father Zeno one time, no electrical cords running from the rectory. So
this sounds like a wonderful program.
Since we're talking about solar, but besides that, you mentioned Mount Carmel, Father Zeno. I just want to congratulate your wife and I for being appointed this year's Chief Marshal for Our Lady of Mount Carmel.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
I had that on my list as well, and it's a great, and while you're here to hear it, because it was going to come after you might have left, just a good congratulations. Very, very, very well deserved. You guys are
Thank you very
back
much. We feel
there,
honored.
working very hard every time I see you.
Appreciate that very much.
It took solar panels.
It's 160 of them.
Nice job.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So we need a receive and file on this, Lou?
So moved.
Seconded?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay, the next item is the council will recall it had during one of its budget discussions a expressed desire to support the repair of the East Burial Ground fence.
Make a motion.
Contingency.
We allocated $3,000 to this, did we not?
Well, we talked about 3,000
The
in the new budget
contingency.
and 3,000 from the contingency to get to the 6,000 that was requested. So I would make
Is
a
that your
motion
motion?
that we approve 3,000 in this year's council contingency towards the fence repair at the East Burial Ground.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
So that'll amount to a total of 6 going to the
Right.
project.
Right.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next item is the periodic report from concerning the Bristol County Water Authority from Barrington Director Alan Klepper.
Make a motion to receive and file?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Secondary.
Next, we have a request for executive session, which I'm sure the council will want to take up at the end of the public agenda. And following that, we begin with the individual council member agenda items, and the chairman is first.
So you've heard lots of references to the budget this year. We're in a challenging year, and boy, does that sound like a broken record, but this one in particular is very, very challenging. You've heard some numbers thrown out there $2.8 million is what we're talking about from the year before. And specifically, this is from the result of the lawsuit brought forth by Warren against the school system to, we'll call it, divvy up the state aid, and changing those formulas a bit because of that makes Bristol, at least at this moment, responsible for $2.8 million more than the year before. To be really clear, that is not increasing the school's budget by one penny. In fact, it's going the other way. And so no one in those two parties is happy at all about what's going on. This council is, and this council represents almost the whole JFC, along with the administrator, makes up the Bristol contingency of that. Very, very challenging to us. Very, very disappointing. 2 days before we were going to vote on the JFC, the Rhode Island Department of Education, RIDE, changed the numbers. And that 2.8 is that end result of that. We were expecting and budgeted throughout the whole process, spent lots of time, assuming there was a $1.6 million increase. And we figured out a way to offset most of that cost by using fund balance and also raising taxes in minimal sense. Because of this, we can't absorb all of those monies, and at this moment we are looking, well, we have to increase taxes. That is a frustrating thing to say because we spent a lot of time and effort the year before and all the way moving up to here to make sure that we would continue to fund the things that are necessary and important to this town. That $2.8 million gets us nothing. Doesn't get us a better school, doesn't get us more students being educated, doesn't get a new parking lot or a football team or a wonderful science teacher. Gets us nothing except more taxes. So we're frustrated. We obviously haven't given up on this. We are setting up meetings with RIDE to verify those numbers, and then also this town is going to appeal that decision in Supreme Court, and if it is overturned, then we will be back to a much better place in regards to those numbers. It is frustrating, and I know I speak for everyone that has been involved with this. I know I speak for my colleagues, and I'm sure they're going to make their own comments on this, but we spend a lot of time and effort. We care about the people of Bristol. We take what we do very seriously, and we are not giving up on this, but we also need to be realistic and deal with what's in front of us at the moment, and that's what we're doing. So that's the negative. Let me go to the positive. Keep Bristol Clean is coming up on April 23rd. That's Saturday morning. That's at the DPW, and if you're not sure where that is 111 Mount Hope Ave. Start there in the a.m. I believe it's 8 a.m. if I'm correct. Grab some coffee, grab some donuts. They'll be there for you, and some gloves. Pick up some trash bags and go out and help clean up this community. It's a phenomenal event. Councilor Stewart and I have gone together. I know Councilor Sweeney's been there. I'm not sure. Yep. And the administrator has gone, and we go out and we get our hands dirty and we go into the woods and we pull out all the dirt and trash and make Bristol a cleaner place. So get involved. Come out and do it. It's a wonderful experience. My kids are doing it now, and they just love to be part of making Bristol a better place. Cool. Colt Andrews had a talent show last night. I promised my son I would bring this up in front of everybody. He was in it, and he was one of 16 kids that did a wonderful job for 3rd and 4th and 5th grade. So wonderful job that goes out to them. It's very challenging to stand in front. If you've never done it before, we do it every 3 weeks or so. But if you're not used to standing or dancing or singing in front of people, it's a challenge. So nice job, everyone who was involved in that. Once again, congratulations to Oki Falco. He is well deserving of this, someone who's given back to this community and will continue to well after this parade is over. He's a wonderful choice for that. Last thing I wanted to bring up is, as the 4th gets closer, it reminds me that we need, and I've talked to the chief on this, and actually I was wondering if you could comment a little, we need to relook at IDs for our employees, and we also need to look at IDs and identification that's appropriate to the elected officials in town. I know that I go to functions, and I know we all do, and there's no way to tell that I'm me besides my business card, and that's not enough, I don't think. And just as important it is for that, there's also a lot of things that happen that I think IDs are invaluable, especially around the 4th. DPW is in and out of places as an example. It's not just them, but they're a great example. Chief, can you kind of share your thoughts on it? I know you and I have talked about it a little bit, but...
Yeah, I think it goes without saying that it's very important that the residents know. I continuously repeat it, that don't let anyone into your resident unless you're familiar with them or unless they have a proper ID. If not, you to contact us, and we're usually a couple of minutes away. Stay on the phone with us, and we'll get there quicker if we need to. There was an incident this week where someone impersonated a Cox Channel employee and told them that the service was going to be terminated unless they made payment. Unfortunately, this person did pay a certain amount of money, and it's an ongoing investigation. With any luck, we're narrowing in, and we have our sights on an individual without getting into any more. But this continues to happen. A couple of years ago, it happened in Cumberland, where it was serious. 2 individuals impersonating, I believe it was a water authority firm, went in and removed jewelry and all kinds of items from the house. One kept a resident occupied while the other one did what he wasn't supposed to do. So I couldn't agree with you anymore. The police department, we have IDs on duty and off duty. The town did do it several years ago, and most of the employees do have it. But I think it's probably time for us to take a closer look at it and make sure that each and every employee has it on him or her at all times, and definitely displays it upon going into someone's property or having it requested of them.
Could you help us maybe do a little bit of research and talk about, maybe come back to this council with some appropriate, whatever the ID should be, some ideas for our employees, some ideas for the elected officials, and on what would be appropriate and what the next steps would be on that? It would seem, or maybe work with the administrator on that. You can tell me what you think of that.
Sure. As I said, most of the employees do have it. I know the highway department, sewer department, fire department, police. But why don't we do a little bit more exploring? Maybe I can reach out to Brother Lou and see, through the clerk's office, and get some information on other communities, what they have.
That'd be great. Okay.
And we'll get back to you on the next council meeting.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Sweeney.
I just want to congratulate Bristol on Expedia.com. I guess if you didn't get a chance to read the front page of the Phoenix last week, Bristol was one of the most 18th interesting destinations to visit, which I think is very, very cool. They use some great words. A unique, charming town, eccentric attractions, must-visit destination, exciting. So we have a lot to offer here. And so even though we've gotten through a tough budget, I like to look at the positive side and say, God, we're so lucky to live in this town that's got so much going for it. So we are going to get through this. We're going to move forward. It's all about state of mind and a good attitude, right? So we're gonna keep forging forward. Just want to congratulate Chief Marshal Oki Falcoa and Donna Falcoa. It's great. It's going to be a wonderful honor. I can't believe it's already coming up. And I'll finally just finish up with happy birthdays to Thomas Jefferson, one of our founding fathers. I mean, amazing person. So.
You didn't write a book with a couple of comments you want to share? No?
Not yet. Not yet. That's next.
Just checking.
That's council meeting. That's it. Have a good one.
Ms. Perella.
Yes, just a couple of comments. So I just would say thank you to the chairman for bringing up the issue about the budget and the school issue. It's something that we all struggled with and worked really hard on, and it's immensely frustrating to have, I think by the time that last set of numbers came 2 days before the JFC meeting, I think that was the third or fourth set that they had provided to us. Mm-hmm. So every time we thought we had understood it and could figure out how to work on the budget, the numbers would change. And I think we had just finished up our, one of the last evenings of our budget deliberations, and we went to the JFC and found, well, actually the night before, I think, we heard that it changed. And then that night, it leaves us very little room to do anything, and it's very, very important. I don't think there's any more important issue pending in Bristol right now than the appeal to the Supreme Court of that issue, because what we don't know yet is if we don't win that, there's also some retroactivity that may go on in terms of how far back we may have to use the new funding formula and retroactively go back to 2, 3, 4 years, and that will cost us another very large chunk of money. So we really need to hope and pray that we win in the appeal, and hopefully, I think everybody on our side believes that we're correct in our interpretation. So that is something that we have been dealing with, and I think it's been a long saga, and it's going to probably continue for another. That was the reference I made earlier in relation to, we go forward. We have to go forward anyway with how we're going to keep and maintain our town in relation to a new bond, because we don't know, and this could be another year before we do have any answers for sure. So thank you for bringing that up, and it's something, we'd all be happy to give you more details if anybody wanted to get more in depth with that. My other two are in terms of congratulations, as I mentioned, to Pat and Nina McCarthy for their being named Chief Marshal to Our Lady of Mount Carmel's 16th of July celebration. Oki Falco, which is very great choice. Matter of fact, as I said that to my mother just a few weeks ago. I said, wouldn't that be interesting if Oki was named, because he's done so much in the community, and so I'm very happy to hear that. And the final congratulations goes to Jacques Delabry and the Bristol Rotary Charities Foundation. And I saw in our packet, I think you all saw the annual Gateway Healthcare Awards Luncheon. And as I just glanced at that, I saw the Leadership Award was being given to Jacques and to the Rotary Charities Foundation. And that is, of course, for the Autism Project that I believe that we have worked on. And their leadership in that is what I imagine. And so we should be happy, very, very proud of the fact that we were one of the first, funders of that project, and we continue to do that. And they've made great progress in a relatively short period of time in serving the people of our community. So with that is all that I have for the moment.
Mr. Stewart.
Congratulations to this year's Chief Marshal, Oki Falco, for 4th of July. It's always a proud moment to take part in the festivities, and we're proud as a community to entertain that holiday as the most patriotic town. This year will mark, I think, a little more fitting march down Hope Street. On Friday, April 1st, I had the opportunity to, along with the administrator, senators and representatives in our federal delegation, to witness our governor, Gina Raimondo, to write into law the legislation of the Sergeant Andrew McKenna highway that runs the route of Warren and Bristol of Route 114. So marching in this year's parade will be a little extra special when we're marching on that pavement in remembrance of him. With that, I believe my colleagues conveyed a lot about the budget. I just want to thank Mike Davis, everyone who discussed the issues here tonight and came out, and everyone tuning in at home. Have a great night.
Okay, and Mr. Harrisoff.
I'd just like to echo what Councilman Stewart said about Sergeant McKenna. And I think back to last year's 4th of July patriotic exercise. After that, I enjoyed very much a rather lengthy conversation with Sergeant McKenna, who had recently returned from one of his numerous assignments to the dangerous part of the world. And I was so impressed with his patriotism and his attitude that I think this naming of that very important street, the Sergeant Andrew McKenna Highway, is a great thing. And that, by the way, is in this 2-week-old Phoenix that Tim Sweeney brought forward, together with the headline that depicts the fact that Bristol is appreciated by this travel agency. And this isn't the first time that our town has been suitably recognized. You remember one of the important magazines a few years ago stated we were the 9th best town in America. I think they've all got it wrong. We really rate better than 18th or 9th, and maybe we'll get some further recognition that takes account of that fact as well.
Yeah, good point.
Pretty soon we'll have a chance to vote, and I urge everybody to go out. That's right. This is an amazing, rather conflicting and mixed up year for both the Democrats and the Republicans. As a Republican, I'm pleased to see the Democrats are in just about as much disarray as the Republicans in the presidential primary. But I think we all should go out and show our preference for whoever and exercise our rights in hopefully selecting somebody who will run this country well. I was over at DPW the other day because I normally buy bags there. And they've raised the price of a group of bags, which is probably fair enough. But there's a sign there that they're going to cease selling bags in July. And I'd just like to say to the town administrator, please review that, because I think those little things that we as a town government do for our citizens are worthwhile. I can't imagine it's a very tough job. I was so disappointed they're not going to sell the bags again. I bought 5 packages, paid the town $50. I hope you take note of that. And I would like to ask you to review the policy. Charge enough that it breaks even, makes a little money, but do the service for the citizens, I would urge. And I would echo the chairman and say what a wonderful event this great Keep Bristol Clean can be, not only for its effect in cleaning the town, but for its satisfaction to those involved, and for some development of the notion and the habit to do everything we can all the time to keep the town clean. In our own new organization, Clean Bristol, the most annoying element of cleanups is the cigarette butts. And in places like Loafers Corner, it's incredible. Even though smoking has been generally given up or diminished, there are these little cigarette butts all over the place. And for that reason, we've purchased 2 backpack vacuums, which are the only way to get them up quick, and we're going to do that and do some more of it. And I also am pleased to report that since we started this Clean Bristol effort to help clear up the streets for the satisfaction of everybody, we've had a couple more volunteers come forward, and so we're going to keep doing it as a voluntary assistance through the town of Bristol, so we can have really clean streets like Tokyo, Osaka, Hiroshima, Fort Worth, and parts of New York City. And Bristol should be just as clean as any of them. Thank you.
Town administrator agenda items.
Well, let me start with the bags very quickly. And if we're going to reconsider the bags, actually, that would be part of the budget, because we had to tweak that because we were losing money on the sale of the bags, approximately $5,000 a year, and that was one of the items that we removed from the budget. So I'll leave that for further discussion. The other piece is a quick update on 125 Franklin Street. If you haven't gone by there, the house has been demolished right down to the foundation. Presently, we have fence around there, and it will be there for a period of time until the area can be secure in a safe way and avoid any injuries to anyone walking by. I would like to congratulate the police and fire and all the folks who coordinated the health expo this past Saturday. It was well attended. It was pointed out, I think, somewhere between 450 to 500 attendees. But we had the presence of our police and fire department, and they provided quite a bit of support, car seats and safety, some safety issues, safety tips. So it's very much appreciated when they come out on their time and spend as much time as they did for 3 hours there. So thank you, Chief. And please pass it on. And also, Chief DeMello, I know you're still back there, so thank you for coordinating, to have 3 trucks there as well. I'm in receipt of a letter. I'm not going to read it, though, but it's an appreciation for the efforts of the police department to one of our town residents. The contents is best not to be discussed, but it's important to share that this individual took the time to actually write quite an extensive letter, showing the appreciation for the service provided by our police department. So thank you. And congratulations to Oki Falco for being selected Chief Marshal. I know it's a great honor. I know how that feels, and it's really, you have to be the proudest person this evening and continue to be as you go through all the festivities. And also Pat McCarthy and Nina, congratulations for being selected marshals for the Mount Carmel Feast. And that's it. Thank you.
The motion would be to convene into executive session pursuant to 42465A2 relative to litigations, Bristol Warren School District.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Okay.